Good morning and welcome to Defense Diaries. I am your host, Bob Mata, and this is our continuing legal coverage of the people of the state of Indiana versus Richard M. Allen. As you can see, I did not go to Delphi. I chose not to go down there. In solidarity with Kathy and the family, I decided to take a pass on it. If you are following my Twitter account, you know at this point that Richard Allen was sentenced to 130 years in his state penitentiary, which is to be determined at a later point. And essentially what will happen is he'll get shifted from where he's currently situated, which is Cass County Jail. He'll be put into kind of a limbo facility while they figure out where they're going to put him. And the defense had asked that, wherever he's going to be held and incarcerated, that it be somewhere that has proper medical facilities in terms of psychological facilities with respect to his conditions. Look, nobody should be surprised. I mean, it was a foregone conclusion what she was going to sentence him to, considering the nature of the crime and considering that we knew that Gull was very much of the mindset early on that Allen was in fact the person who had committed these crimes. So it was one of those situations where you knew what was going to end up happening. So from what I've learned from people inside, these are some of the details, and I'm going to cover the press conference when it starts. I've got it pulled up here, and it's going to be, the prosecutors, Indiana State Police. I think the Patties are supposed to speak, and no one from Richard Allen's family showed up for him, but that was not because they weren't supporting him. It's because they were rejecting the verdict and the sentence. So they weren't going to sit in there. That's why. Just to clarify that, I saw a comment over here that they didn't show up to support him. That's Richard asked that they not come, and it was a decision that was made by the family that they weren't going to show up for it because they reject the verdict and the sentence that she was going to impose. I think everybody knew that it was going to be what it ended up being. So there was one bit of good news that came out of it. There had been a motion that had been filed by the defense seeking that the state appellate defender, public defender, which is the appellate defender, be appointed as opposed to somebody local from Carroll County or even more scary Allen County, and she did grant that. So that's a good bit of news, because when you have that entire office involved, there's going to be multiple appellate lawyers involved. So in terms of the appeal, which this is, just understand it. I mean, it's definitely going to be appealed. And, I mean, that process is going to be moving forward, which is one of the things that I'm always talking about, right? When we were talking about kind of the procedural posture of this case, we had to continually talk about the fact that decisions that were made would end up resulting in, more likely than not, this thing getting overturned. And like I've said, to me, the only thing that potentially might stop that from happening is if the appellate court initially on direct appeal finds that the manifest weight of the confessions is such that it didn't matter what other mistakes that she may have made, such as not allowing the third party culprit stuff to come in, other various things, her pulling him off the case kind of in the middle of it, the violation of his due process rights. If they feel that none of those things outweigh the confessions, because they feel that the confessions are bulletproof, then they can find that all of her other mistakes were harmless error and deny it, because they'll say that, look, even if you had put the third party culprit stuff on, that it wouldn't have outweighed the confessions. So, but that would be at just the appellate level. And then at that point, they would then appeal to the Indiana Supreme Court. Indiana Supreme Court would weigh in. And once that happens, we basically have a situation where, you're swinging over to the federal side and you're going through the federal route. So, I mean, it could be a very long process. We will find out in pretty short order. So let me see. Okay. I've got a couple of different channels up. I want to make sure, excuse me, that we are not going to miss any of this. I mean, this is going to be a lot of congratulating. We'll see. So some of the other details, Richard Allen did not make a statement in allocution. There were multiple victim impact statements. Both Mike and Becky Patty made an impact statement. As you can imagine, they were rather upset with Richard Allen and were, admonishing him and, telling him that he stole the girls from them and from everybody. There were a couple of others. I think Abby or Libby's cousin. Yeah, she did, Michael. That was the one. That was one good thing that came out of today. She did. I got that. That's per Andy Baldwin. He told me that. So I sent an invite to Andy. Gull did lift the gag order. So Andy's running around. I don't know what he's doing. I did send him an invite to see if he'll come on this morning. If not, I'm going to try to get Andrew Baldwin on tonight to get his thoughts on what went on. So yeah, no statement in allocution by Richard Allen. Apparently he walked in, he had his Bible with him. And I think Andy had his arm around Richard Allen the whole time for the entire hearing. As I said earlier, if you're running late, none of Allen's family showed up. That wasn't because they weren't supporting Rick. It was quite the opposite. That was done in support of Rick, because the family's position is they're rejecting the verdict and the sentence as well. So there's that. And Gull apparently addressed Alan and said that, that you had rolled your eyes several times at me during the trial, that you showed no remorse for what you've done. And additionally, that I, I don't know. I'll find out. I've been trying to get information. Yes, somebody spoke for Abby for sure. Um, there was either one or two people that spoke for Abby. So, um, we're at this point now where there more likely than not will be a motion to correct errors. It'll be filed. Mike, do you want to come on? Michael, do you want me to send you a link? So just let me know. Text me if you do. And once that takes place, in Indiana, you don't. It was this. Yeah, it's the state public defender. Here we have it. They call it the state appellate defender. So I don't. Yes, it was the state public defender. She granted the defense's motion per Baldwin. Baldwin told me that. So let me see. I'm keeping an eye on this here. And we will, as soon as that presser starts, we'll put it on and hear what they have to say. So what else? What else did I learn? So I got everything secondhand because I apparently only 13 people with the public were allowed to get in. And I mean, I didn't make the drive. I did not make the drive. So I decided yesterday that I wasn't going to go. I was planning on going to see this thing through to the end, but in terms of the fact that I consider myself an advocate for Kathy Allen, and if she wasn't going, I wasn't going to go. So that was that. Plus, we got some snow, but that's not the real reason. I would have driven through the snow. Snow doesn't scare me. So let me see. I'm going to pull this thing up. We'll just kind of wait. I saw a couple people went live from over at the area at Carroll County. They're outside the courthouse. They're setting up the press conference, and I imagine it's probably going to get rolling here any minute. And look, it can't be one of those things that you have a situation where you can be surprised by what happened today. I mean, we all knew. I mean, if you're following this case, you knew she was going to sentence them to the maximum. Because I mean, 2 little girls were killed, and that's the thing. Hold on one sec. Hey, what's up? I'm on a live.
It's fine. I'm cleared to talk on a limited basis, and you're one of the people I've been given approval to talk to. Just let me know.
Do you want to come on the live?
I'm on the road right now. I can do it on the phone.
Okay, I'll send you an invite.
Oh, you can catch me, and I'm fine.
All right. Okay. Bye.
Good.
Okay. All right. Let me do a little work while we're live here. I'm going to get Osbrook on. I'm going to send him the link. Okay. Okay. Let me send a couple of invites. All right. Okay, Michael, I sent that. I'm also going to send it to. All right, bear with me, kids. Bear with me. Bear with me. Okay. All right. Let me see when Michael comes on. All right, so we're gonna have Osberg's gonna come on. He'll be able to talk about some of the logistics of what we can expect. What's up, Michael? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I got to get rid of this. Got to get rid of the YouTube part of this. Hang on.
Okay.
I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Good.
All right. So not surprising, right? I mean, it's what we expected.
What else is a judge going to do with two girls killed? The person's been convicted. Of course, they're going to get 130 years. I mean, there's no surprise here.
Exactly. There's no, oh, we'll do a little bit of, maybe there was a little bit, there's a little doubt. So I'm going to shave a couple. No, it was always going to be 130 years. So,
I mean, I had another client who was in front of Gull, and he was convicted of assisting in two murders in Allen County, and I mean, he didn't shoot anybody, and he got 130 years. So,
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised. So, what are the next steps? Like, what are the next things that we can expect to do?
well, the deadline for either a notice of appeal or motion to correct error is the 21st of January. Normally, it's 30 days, but 30 days is the 19th of January. That's a Sunday. The 21st is Martin Luther King's birthday, so the next business day is the 21st, which is Tuesday. And so either the appeal gets on the road or with a notice of appeal, or some work that's being done by various people produces something for a motion to correct error. And, Gull may deny that overnight without a hearing. We'll see.
Yeah. And so explain to the people what that motion to correct errors is.
Well, a motion to correct error it can have two purposes. It gives the judge a chance to fix legal errors. The only way to fix legal errors in this case is a new trial. We know that's not going to happen. The other purpose of a motion to correct error is to get newly discovered evidence in other words, stuff that pops up between the time of the stuff that really you couldn't have gotten your hands on before trial.
Okay. So, I mean, in that particular type of motion, can you raise issues that were not part of the trial, kind of like a little bit like a post-conviction relief petition, in the sense that you can bring, because obviously the direct appeal is limited to what happened pre-trial and a trial. Is it like, can you raise other things in that particular motion, like specific?
Well, and that's what the newly discovered evidence part of it is stuff that could not have been raised before trial because using due diligence, I guess is the language. It's evidence you could not have discovered before trial, stuff that what happens if you have somebody who walks in and confesses, right, and says, oh, and here are the knives, and by the way, the blood's still on the knives. I mean, somebody does that between now and the 21st of January.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you can put that in.
Well, so what about now? What do they consider newly discovered in terms of that particular motion with respect to things that may be discovered from the discovery itself, that maybe because it was, maybe because the matter was rushed to trial and all of it wasn't combed through, things like that. Could that be construed as newly discovered? Or say for instance, you find something in the discovery that leads to a conversation with somebody else that wasn't listed in the discovery, but that, like, say for instance, a tip came in, that tip then leads you to speak to somebody else that has information that wasn't contained in the discovery. That would fall under newly discovered, right?
That's people are going to argue about whether it's newly discovered or not. I would say, again, as you like to say, I come from a defense perspective.
Right.
That isn't to say, I mean, I've done the other side too. I mean, I was a deputy attorney general for a while, defending convictions on appeal. If there was trial testimony that you had no reason to, that was completely new, that casts things in stuff you have in an entirely new light, and that you couldn't have and really couldn't have anticipated, there's certainly an argument to be made. That's newly discovered evidence.
Yeah, I agree. But yeah, that will be left for a judge to determine whether or not. And look, I mean, you're right in terms of whatever ends up getting filed. If it's the motion to correct error, we can anticipate that that'll be just a very quick turnaround from Gull, wherein she'll deny it, and then at that point, the notice of appeal gets filed. Now, so I was able to confirm that the state public defender was appointed. So how does it, like, what's the difference between having them appointed and, say, if Gull had appointed an appellate defender from her county?
Well, I think the difference here's the difference. So Amy Carrozos is the Indiana public defender. She's the head of the office that handles their major job is handling state post-conviction petitions, not direct appeals, but state post-conviction petitions for poor people, which is just about everybody, right? I mean, you're in prison. I mean, there aren't many people in prison who have a bunch of money to hire private counsel. Some do, but it's just a fact that that's not the rule. It is the exception. So Amy, sitting there as the head of that office with 40 lawyers or so, she knows everybody in the state. She knows who the terrific appellate lawyers are. She knows, and so she has just a bigger bucket to appoint somebody from. Now, again, when I say appoint, it's not up to her. What she will do is she will tell Gull, I want to appoint this person. Gull has to approve it, and I got to tell you, it's not a foregone conclusion. The state PD appointed me in a case that I'd handled for. That's a case that came back from federal court. It was back in state court, and it was referred to the state PD for appellate counsel in the new direct appeal that was ordered by the federal courts. I was appointed, and the judge said, "Not in this lifetime."
Right. So, and just to be clear, I see people asking whether or not, like, Andy and Brad will not be involved with the appellate side of this.
Well, I certainly hope they're going to be involved between now and the time to file a motion to correct error. But no, once the notice of appeal is filed, they're out.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, you need them for this next phase. All right. I'm going to bring Erica Morse on. Hey, what's up, Erica?
Hey, Bob, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. So, why don't you introduce yourself to everybody? You've been gagged for what, two plus years. Say hi to Michael, by the way, Erica. He's on
Hey,
with us.
Mike.
Hey there.
So why don't you tell the folks who you are, Erica?
So my name is Erica Morse. Next week marks my 14th year in victims advocacy. I got my private investigator's license in 2018 on the Haley Dunn case, and I joined the defense team for Rick Allen in February of 2023.
Okay. And so were you in court today?
It was, Bob. It was hard to watch.
Okay. So start giving us the details. I got some secondhand stuff, and Andy's been texting me a little bit about what went on. So why don't you kind of walk us through it?
All right, and I apologize. I'm driving up north right now. If the internet goes out a little bit, the prosecution called one witness today, and that's the man who framed Rick Allen for murder. That's Jerry Holman.
Okay.
They called the only man who had to get on that stand and save himself and his own career. I was an investigative reporter from the age of 16, Bob, and we are going to start to get into the history of police corruption in northern and central Indiana now that I've been cleared to talk to certain folks. And you and Allie were at the top of that list that we've been cleared to talk to.
Okay.
It was really hard to sit there and listen to Jerry Holman disparage Rick, disparage Kathy, disparage his family, and disparage our defense team, who has worked night and day for the last 2 years to do the jobs that the paid police failed to do. And that was investigate the murders of Abigail Williams and Liberty German. I was so angry to hear Holman reference the many tips they followed. There were tips that were never cleared. Never cleared. And those tips lead back to the same people who have controlled this case for 2 years. I have every intention of remaining on this team and giving everything I know to continuing to set Rick free, continuing to try to set Rick free. So I am limited on the things that I can say because investigative details will matter. And I'm glad that Mike's on because Mike's really versed in what an investigator should and should not say. Mike's really versed in what.
All right. So
Hey, Allie.
yeah, I know you're fired up.
You know I'm fired up, Bob. You know I'm mad.
Yeah, I know you are. So, all right. So Holman gets on. Give us all the details, because as you know, I did not show up today.
Yeah, I know. And listen, I love you for it. I understand. I appreciate you supporting Kathy and the family. I really do. But I needed to be there for Rick. I wanted him to see that we weren't going anywhere as a team. And just as he was walking out of the courtroom, I just told him to hang in there. I love him, and I'll talk to him soon. In terms of Holman's testimony, I took notes, Bob, because you know how I take notes. And let me take a look here. One thing that I found very interesting is that Holman referenced that that he killed one of them in front of the other and allowed the other to watch, or forced the other to watch. And as you know, attending trial, there was no time of death associated with either girl.
Right.
I feel like the Freudian slips are beginning to occur. They occurred all throughout trial. As you know, Bob, my specific role at that trial was to take down every word said by every prosecution witness and then go back and compare it to their earlier reports, their earlier depositions, and their earlier testimonies and other hearings. We got problems. We got problems with the way the state's story evolved over the last 2 years. See, when you tell the truth, you don't have to change your story. But when you're lying through your teeth, details change because it's hard to remember a lie. And there have been a lot told. Sure,
Can I
Mike.
interrupt you for a second?
Sure,
Yeah,
Mike.
and I think Bob will back me up on this. You know, the changing story thing is usually what happens on the defense side, that the prosecution, I mean, right? It's usually the defense story that changes and the prosecution says that shows that they're guilty. Where you have the prosecution story changing repeatedly over time, that should give you reason to think. All I wanted to say. Go on, Erica.
No,
Yeah, and I
Mike is
concur.
absolutely correct. He's absolutely correct. And my sole job during that trial was to capture every lie. Because those lies led us to new information. I cannot speak to any newly discovered information, any newly discovered evidence. Mike will gag me quicker than anything. And I'm fine with that. But what I can tell you is that they were overconfident when they testified. I don't know if they didn't anticipate that they would not have someone hanging on every word and comparing those words to their earlier words and their earlier versions. When Andy started his opening statement, he made that very clear. He said, watch for the state's case to change. Watch for the state's story to change. Watch for their narrative to evolve, and watch as this trial progresses. They will bring in things in the beginning that they are going to ask you to forget about towards the end as we begin to put on our case. And that is exactly what happened. And the reason that happened was because they realized we had them. We've had them all along. And, you know, the other thing I have to say about this defense team is that we have taken more hits on our reputations, our personal and professional levels. I know Jerry Holmes is scared, and he should be, because his career's on the line. When we finally get back in front of a judge and a fact finder who appreciates neutrality and appreciates search for the truth, lots going to come out. And if I were the cops responsible for framing an innocent man, and I put all of my eggs in that basket, I'm going to be paying attention as to the timelines of his arrest, the timelines of when he was moved, certain facilities. If he thought we weren't going to find out about Monica Walla playing with Gray Hughes and getting inside information that she was then feeding to our client while he was being pumped full of an antipsychotic medication, I think really what they were hoping for is that public offenders would be assigned to Rick Allen that didn't give a damn. And boy, did Andy Baldwin call their bluff.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to tell you how I got involved in this case, Bob. You and I have talked about it before. I told you the day would come I would tell this story on your air, and today's the day.
All right, let's hear it.
February 20th, 23, I get a phone call from Jason Jensen, who was looking at starting an agency in Indiana specifically for the Delphi murder case. I was asked to meet with Andy Baldwin and Brad Rossi and take a walk down the Monon High Bridge that day. I met with Andy, Brad, Matt Hoffman, and Jason Jensen. And the five of us toured that bridge and that crime scene. Andy Baldwin then pulled me aside and spoke with me privately. And that is when he asked me to please join the case. I told Andy that at that time I had been a 12-year victims advocate and private investigator on the victim side. I have never taken a case involving someone accused of the most heinous crime. And I would not defend Rick Allen. He said, give me 2 weeks. Let me send you a couple samples of discovery, sign an NDA, and I want you to look it over. If at the end of that 2 weeks, you believe that Rick Allen is guilty, then you walk away and you tell me that. But Erica, if I can convince you of Rick Allen's innocence, you can help me convince the world. I called him 2 days later and said I'm in. And I don't care what it costs me. Rick Allen is an innocent man. There are names I recognize in that discovery that link to other unsolved murders throughout the state of Indiana. And this case is going to be the one that opens up the can of worms against Indiana police corruption once and for all. I told him I can link the players from these memos and from the Odin report and other crimes. I knew things he had no knowledge I knew. I know Andy wanted me for my experience in working cases with ritualistic sacrifices. I'm not stupid. I had just been all over the press for the arrest of Sean Atkins and the Haley Dunn murder. I know why I was sought out, and I'm fine with that. Because what we found, what we took from that Odin report and were able to comprehensively create into the Franks memo, there is so much more. And we want all of this to come out at trial. All of this at a real trial, not this practice run that allowed the state to create a narrative that wasn't even true, to manipulate evidence, and to be able to refer to evidence that was never pulled out of the paper bags. The gun, Bob, was never shown at trial. The bullet, Bob, was never shown at trial. The jacket, Bob, was never shown at trial. All of these things that they hung their entire case on, they couldn't even pull them out of the evidence bags and produce them because we were trying to get access to those items for 2 years and were continuously denied the ability to view those pieces of evidence with our own eyes. And we know what that reason is. Indiana State Police's biggest mistake in this case, as far as I'm concerned, is they handed us their playbook to corruption. And we have now gone back and looked at many other cases, as have others, and eyes are wide open now. Kathy tells me every day, this is too big now. They should have never chosen Rick. It's too big. They cannot put this back in the bag.
I'm going to interrupt a second.
Go ahead.
I was telling somebody else the other day that who'd mentioned the biggest mistake that they'd made, and I just wanted to suggest that I don't know if it's the biggest mistake they made, but it was definitely a mistake pissing off a habeas lawyer.
So
If they only knew, Mike, how hard we've been working, man. That's all I can tell you. That's all I can say right now.
Michael, I know that many of our viewers have heard you on the show before, but why don't you explain to what a habeas lawyer does?
Well, what a habeas lawyer does, for the most part, at least what I've done, is you can look at it in a way. You can look at it as quality control on the state courts, and that is my class and I have taken cases that the Indiana appellate court have really made huge mistakes on. I mean, really unforgivable mistakes. Misapplying really clear constitutional rules, misstating the facts, and we take them to federal court and try to get a federal court to say, yeah, no reasonable person would have, no reasonable court would have done that. But that's usually at the end of the process. So, in Rick's case, I probably won't be doing habeas cases by the time Rick's case gets there. I mean, it's usually federal court's usually the last thing. So, I get a case when I've seen everything, and then it comes back to state court, and I'm usually involved in that too, because by the time I've gotten habeas relief for somebody, federal courts have said, new trial, new appeal, whatever. I've lived with the case then for probably 5 years. And, at that point, I know it better than anybody else. So, I'm involved in state courts, and usually it involves reinvestigation. So, I'm also involved in the investigation things at the end, but that's not basically what the habeas part of it is.
All right. So do one of you guys have the YouTube on your phone? Like I'm getting like a background, like people are hearing an echo, or one of you guys watching the live? Either one of you. If you are, turn it off. Because it's creating an echo effect.
I don't think so. I'm driving, so bear with me.
If
Is
it's
it gone
anybody,
now?
it's you, Erica. I know that.
It's not me.
All right.
Is it gone or not?
I'm still here. It's kind of a faint, like it's like a reverb almost. All right. A couple people complained about it. So yes, we are going to watch this. We're absolutely going to watch this. I want to hear what they're saying. So
I'll get off.
Oh, you don't want to watch this with us, Michael?
Oh, I can watch it. I'll put it on mute and we can watch this. I mean, watching the folks dunk, the après ski.
Yeah, it'll be a lot of backpedalling.
My name is Jeremy Piers with Indiana State Police. I'd like to thank you all for being here today and for your continued cooperation throughout the course of this trial. I'd also like to extend a special thank you to the Canal Center for allowing us to use their facility today. As we move forward, we remain committed to keeping Abigail Williams and Liberty German at the center of our focus. Their memory has guided us every step of the investigation, and the photo displayed behind us serves as a powerful reminder of why we're here and what this case has always been about. Due to the gag order, it has been some time since we have spoke publicly about this case. Now that the order has been lifted, we're grateful to be here today and speak to all of you. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce to you the speakers: Mike Patty from the families, Carroll County Sheriff Tony Liggett, Indiana State Police Superintendent Doug Carter, and Carroll County Prosecutor Nick McClelland. At the conclusion of their remarks, Prosecutor McClelland will take a limited number of questions, and he has requested that all questions be directed to him. On behalf of those standing behind me here today and all those who have dedicated countless hours into this investigation, we thank you all for your continued support. I'd like to introduce to you our first speaker, Mike Patty.
Thank you, Jeremy. I don't have a nice speech all prepared. It was kind of a last minute thing here, but I really wanted to take the time to send out my appreciation that justice has been served for the girls. I want to thank the jurors. Hope they get a chance to see this, that they took time out of their lives and remained open-minded and objective and was able to look at the information and deliver a verdict. For that, I will always be grateful. The community. This community has embraced our families from day one and continues to lift us up and support us. And again, for that, I'll always be grateful. I want to thank them. The investigative team and the prosecution, thank you for staying steadfast, continuing to work towards this. It's been almost 8 years coming. If I live to make it 80, it'll almost be 10% of my life has been spent working on this. And to the judge, I want to thank her as well for her steadfast, staying on course, staying on track, and helping us get through this. Thank you very much. Tony.
Good morning. The end of 2016 and the beginning of 2017 completely changed the fabric of Carroll County. We lost 6 beautiful young girls, and all of that happened within a 6-month time span. My office is not a part of the investigation into the Flora fires that's being headed up by the state police. We would do anything that they would ask for us to do, and I know they're working extremely hard on that case as well. Carroll County is a tight-knit community, about 20,000 people. It used to be a place where people didn't lock their doors. I believe that the verdict and the sentencing will help ease some of that sense of security for the people of Carroll County. The people who live here are very resilient. I think you can see that just in the families, the Germans, the Patties, the Williams. Carroll County is an amazing place to live, to work, to raise your family. I want to thank all of the people of Carroll County and the families for their patience during this investigation. I keep hearing the word closure. People are coming up to me saying, I bet that you're glad that there's finally closure. There will never be any closure in this case. The Germans and the Williams family lost their daughters, their granddaughters, their siblings. Justice, a form of justice was served, but it does not bring Abby or Libby back. These families will live every day without 2 of the most important people in their lives. They're missing milestones because of a low-life coward decided to take their innocent lives. They did not deserve this. Today is not closure. It is just turning the page and starting a new chapter. My heart is and always has been broken for these families. I want them to know that we stand with them, and I want to apologize to them that it took 8 years for us to get to this point. This case was quite the undertaking for the Carroll County Sheriff's Office. There are so many people that put a lot of time in assisting us with bringing it to a conclusion. You see a lot of them right here, and there are many that aren't standing up here. There are so many agencies to thank for standing by our side. Just to give you an idea of support that we had just for the trial, we had 36 outside agencies help us for just the security during the trial. On the afternoon of February 14th, at least that many came to help us investigate this case. Everyone from detectives down to dispatchers to help investigate or just answer phones. I remember a conversation after we found the girls with Jerry Holman about whether or not we were going to take the case or Indiana State Police were going to take the case. Well, it was not my decision. It was not my decision, but I knew we didn't have the resources needed to do this on our own. Holman made a commitment that if we took the case, ISP wouldn't leave us and they would stand by our side and provide any of those resources that we needed, and they did just that. Tobe Lesenby was the sheriff at the time, and he asked ISP to stand with us. I want to thank Doug Carter and the rest of the Indiana State Police for being with us during this time. The reason justice was served today was due to one person, a person that only knows how to give. She has given herself literally for free to this investigation in different ways since about March of 2017. Kathy Shank, while filing, scanning, organizing, found a tip that led us to be here today. Throughout this investigation, especially when things happened during the month, for things that happened during the month of 2017, that was a time when Kathy was not helping us. When she would come across something that she didn't know, she would always bring that to an investigator. And every time that she brought us something and said, "Did you know this?" We knew it, except for the tip that she brought us that got us here today. To borrow a term I believe was started by Becky Patty, a saying that meant enough to me that I had it on a sticker on my computer, in my car, and on my refrigerator at home. The goal was actually to be able to say the words, and they ring true. There is zero doubt that justice has been served, and today is the day. Thank you.
I had prepared remarks today, but I decided walking in here that I wasn't going to read them. John Perrine reminded me that 2,866 days ago, this entire thing began. I didn't know what I would think, and I didn't realize today we were going to be walking into the same room where many of you were, I believe in, again, from memory, April of 2019 or that time frame. And over the course of these last many years now, several of us, me included, have been mocked and ostracized for our emotion, for our inability to answer questions that you might ask, and the thought that we're something other than human beings. I'm not going to apologize for that. I often say I wish people could see what goes on behind the scenes, and not just with people dressed like me, but citizens of this county and of this city. It's amazing, amazing acts of unbelievable courage and self-service and self-sacrifice. I wish you all could have been in the courtroom today and heard the victim impact statements. I'll always remember them. And I hope you'll get the transcripts and read what was said and try and understand the context of those words, even though you weren't in the courtroom. Over the course of these last many years, there have been many investigative strategies. Any notion of a cover-up, any notion of us deciding the outcome of this, any notion of any connection to anything else is not correct. It's not correct. I've never been a detective in my entire lifetime, but I get to represent some of the best on the planet Earth. And I listened to them intently. And when they made strategy decisions associated with what the next steps would be, my job was to support them, and I stand by those decisions, every single one of them. The gag order We lived by that. We lived by that gag order. The defense did not. And it cost a human life. Anybody that shares those photographs of those two little girls should be held accountable, whether they're in the public sphere, whether they're emailed to you, whether you found them in a place you didn't want them to see. I hope that if you ever see them, you'll picture your own children as Abby and Libby. I'll never forgive that. I will never, ever forgive that. We lived by the gag order. Documents were released from the defense that drove a public narrative that many of you talked about. And damn it, I wish I could have responded, but I was not going to violate what Judge Gall said. So they were able to get these documents out there and create a public narrative that you and many others, many of you and many others believed around the globe. Baldwin and Rossi are responsible for that, not this team. The family effects, I think you'll see the words that were spoken by the folks that spoke today about their lives and how they've been forever changed, how they'll never be the same. And they said it in ways that were beautiful in some kind of a mysterious way. There's an attorney in Indianapolis by the name of Guy Relford. And I heard Guy on the radio after the verdict when a lot of hate mail came, death threats came. And I heard Guy Relford say that day on the radio, and I called him 15 minutes after he said it. And after 40 years in this business, I never thought about the jury's perspective. But he said the only people that mattered in that courtroom was the jury. And he went on to talk about, he's a very bright attorney. He went on to talk about what they can see that we can't, that you couldn't. They could see the defense. They could see the state. They could see the witnesses, feel the emotion. And they could see Richard Allen. I've never thought about that perspective because we have a singular view most times. You, me, it's human nature. Judge Gall was a keeper of the peace in that courtroom, but the people that mattered were those 12 jurors. And we have a system of justice that allows them to decide the fate of a human being. That's what our founders had established. And that's what they did. I hope you all understand that what you say and how you report matters more than you can ever possibly comprehend. This is an opportunity for us to all learn about what social media is and isn't, what we should do and what we shouldn't, and understand that their words have consequences to other human beings. I appreciated Guy's perspective, and it changed my view of the criminal proceeding. Richard Allen knew. We live in a country where people can hate. People can say things about other people. And that's okay. Hate me. It's okay. It's one of the only countries in the world where you can. So hate me if you want to. The investigative collaboration is something that I'll remember for the rest of my life. For the rest of my life. There's no way we could possibly chronicle it or articulate it or write about it or anything. There's no way we could ever do that. We are human beings, and there were mistakes made. But there was never a mistake made that we knew was wrong when we did it. I'll crawl across shards of hot glass for Jerry Holman. Jerry Holman is not a liar. Jerry Holman gave the last 8 years of his life to something much greater than himself. We fussed with each other throughout the course of this. In conclusion, we argued with each other. I remember Toby and I had an argument right here in this other room in April of 19, as you should expect us to. There was no groupthink. We debated each other, as you should expect us to. But then the defense spins it into incompetence. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous nonsense for Baldwin and Rozzi to have done that. And finally, most importantly, to the Delphi community and to the family of Abby and Libby. Words cannot possibly explain what we all feel. But what Nick McClellan did and the rest of the team that was associated with this, every single time it was about something other than themselves. It was about this community and that family. And we owe them a debt of gratitude that can never possibly be repaid. How about we start to heal now? How about we hit that reset button and understand that justice in this country was served. And if you don't like justice in this country, go do another one. Let's heal. Tone down the rhetoric. Stop all the politics and all the nonsense and all the conspiracy theories and understand that we all tried the best we could. That should be the message to us and to our kids and to this most amazing place we call the United States of America. Well done. Thank you all.
Good morning. Can we all just have a little bit of a sigh of relief that this thing is over finally? The convictions come in. We've got the verdict. We got the sentence, 130 years in the Department of Corrections. And while I don't think ever this verdict or this conviction will ever bring peace to the family, I hope that they can take this sigh of relief with me to say that this part of the trial is over, that we got the conviction, that we got the sentence that brings justice for Abby and Libby. A few of the things I am going to say are going to echo what Sheriff Liggett said, what Superintendent Carter said, and what Mike Patty said. But I'd be remiss if I didn't thank some people along the way. Law enforcement, Carroll County Sheriff's Department, Indiana State Police, Department of Natural Resources, all the agencies that assisted in this investigation and the prosecution of the defendant, I want to thank. They were attacked by members on the internet for their integrity. They were called corrupt. They were called evil. And they were called liars. And they weathered that storm with professionalism and did what they could to be a shield for the families. Spent countless hours chasing down leaks of crime scene photos, countless hours attempting to scrub the internet of those crime scene photos, and countless hours trying to protect the family as best as they could. And so to them, ISP, Carroll County Sheriff's Department, DNR, the other agencies that assisted, thank you. We would not be here today if it were not for your efforts and your countless hours that you sacrificed away from your family and your friends to give us the evidence that we needed to get the conviction. I want to thank my team, Stacy Diener, James Luttrell. There is no way I could have tried this case without them. We spent countless hours working on this case, away from our families, away from our friends, and no one will understand the heart and the effort that they poured into this. So thank you. I want to thank Kathy Shank. She kept us well fed. She was the grandmother of our office, if you will. She made sure that whatever we needed, she took care of, and she never complained. And without her, we would not be here. Without her countless hours of going over filings, of scanning in documents, of looking at reports, and having the wherewithal to bring this to the attention of Sheriff Liggett, to say, hey, I haven't seen this before. Has anybody followed up with this person? Without her, we would not be here. Without her, we would not have an arrest, a conviction, and a sentence. She was the key part to this investigation. The needle in the haystack, if you will, that brought this investigation to a close to where we could make an arrest. Kathy Shank, I thank you. And finally, the family. The Williams, the Germans, the Patties. Thank all you guys. The support you gave me throughout this. Those times when I said you had to abide by the gag order, that you wanted to respond to the things that were being put out there, the allegations against you, against your family members, that you respected me to the point where you were willing to agree to abide by that gag order for the betterment of the case. The fact that you supported me throughout it, and I know there may be times you doubted, but you endured. And without your help, we wouldn't have got the conviction. And without your victim impact statements and the graceful words that you gave to the court about how this has influenced your lives, we wouldn't have got the sentence that we got. 130 years, maximum sentence on each count. And so I thank you. Finally, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Abby and Libby themselves. Libby for recording the defendant as he walked across the bridge, having the wherewithal to pull out her phone and record that individual, having the wherewithal to know that something wasn't right. Arguably the biggest piece of evidence that we had, that recording of their killer. And then to Abby for hiding the phone from the killer so that he couldn't take it with him, hiding the phone so that law enforcement could find it and get that piece of evidence that Libby had collected. Without the efforts from those two little girls, we wouldn't be here today. So Abby and Libby, thank you. I want to say we're very happy with the jury's verdict. We're elated with the judge's ruling, or not the judge's ruling, the judge's sentence. The sentence is appropriate. As Judge Gall stated in court, the aggravators outweighed the mitigators, and the heinous nature of this crime deserve a fully executed sentence. I'll end with this. I want to thank the media for keeping this case in the forefront, for keeping the tips coming in for us to investigate. But I will leave you this word of caution. Please, as Superintendent Carter said, the crime scene photos are still out there, and more may be out there in the future. Please, if you receive those, delete those. Don't forward those on. Don't re-victimize the family and the other family members. You can write whatever story you want and report however you want. You do not need those crime scene photos to do so. All it does is re-victimize the families and hurt the reputation of Abby and Libby. So please, if you get those, do not forward those on. If you get any other crime scene photos or autopsy photos or anything, don't forward those on. As Superintendent Carter said, imagine if they were your kids, your grandkids. You can write a story without having those pieces as part of the narrative. So please, do not forward those on. I want to thank the community finally. Everybody in the community locally has supported my office, supported law enforcement. The show of support from them has been just unforgettable. I appreciate everything everyone's done. I appreciate the prayers. I appreciate the handshakes, the support, everything that everybody's done throughout this course of the 8-year investigation. When this investigation started, I was actually a defense attorney. I ran for the prosecutor's office in January 1st of 2018, and I knew coming into that office that this case was one that I would have to investigate. And I made it one of my goals, not only to investigate it, but to get an arrest, have the trial, and get a conviction. And all the support I had throughout that time, I appreciate it. And so, as Trooper Pierce said, I'm going to answer a few questions. The gag order is lifted. You're more than welcome to talk to anybody up here individually afterwards if they want to talk to you. But I will take a few questions here and now. It's not easy. it's hard to put yourself in their shoes because I've never had a child die. And so it was very difficult. It took a lot of phone calls, text messages, meetings. A lot of it was, hey, try not to read that stuff that you see on the internet, which is easier said than done. But a lot of it was just moral support and leaning on each other to say, we can't violate the gag order. Let's keep our eye on the ball. We need to get the trial and we want to try to get the conviction, and then we can talk. And so it was just a lot of words of encouragement between each other, moral support, text message, phone calls, those kind of things. Go ahead.
What happened with Ms. O'Shea at the end of the hearing? What was that fight about?
It wasn't a fight. She was just commenting about some things that were said at sentencing, and I'm just going to keep those things to myself. Well, I don't know if she got up in my face. I'll just keep those things to myself. She was just commenting on things that were said at the sentencing. Yes, ma'am.
The defense has made it clear they plan to appeal. Your thoughts on their chances?
Well, it's not up to the defense. It's up to the defendant. I'm not going to repeat his name. He's the defendant at this point. And so he has 30 days to file notice with the court that he wants to appeal. If he doesn't file that notice, then there is no appeal. And so once he files that notice, we'll deal with it accordingly. We'll work with the Attorney General's office to represent the state, and we'll give them whatever support that they need in order to draft a response to that appeal.
But I guess given all the questions and all the rest up here, how frustrating it was, your confidence in the security of this verdict and then this maximum sentence?
I feel confident in the verdict and the sentence. But again, I'm not on the Court of Appeals, so they'll have to make that decision if it comes to them. Sorry, Ms. Well, at this point, we don't believe any other actors are involved. We don't have any evidence to support that. If evidence comes out in the future to support that, we'll obviously investigate that. We're not going to say, hey, no, we got the conviction. We're not listening to what you have to say. But at this point, we have no other evidence showing that any other actors were involved. If Richard Allen himself, the defendant, wants to come forward and give us more information, we'll gladly accept that. The amended charges were we added the 2 counts of intentional murder. I did that because I thought it was appropriate at the time. Yep. Hold on just a minute. Do you have a question?
Yeah, can you tell us, or maybe asking to speak on behalf of other people, how it makes you feel with the guilty verdict and the sentence? Obviously, it's definitely you guys want it, but how does it make the entire team feel to get to where we are today?
I think, I hate to speak for everybody, but I think, I hate to be cliche and use the word justice, but justice, vindication, to show that the people standing behind me weren't liars, weren't corrupt. You know, those hate mails and hate messages continue to come in from some podcasters, some YouTubers. But I think just justification that, okay, we conducted a clean investigation. We presented the evidence as best we could. And the jury were convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that he was guilty. Yes.
Does this now mean that all the other men are cleared? Can you use that word?
Who is all the other men?
The other men that were looked at during the course of the investigation that you always said you couldn't say that they're cleared. Can you now say they're cleared?
I may not use that word cleared, but what I can tell you is we don't have any other evidence that ties them to the offense at this time. What do you mean looking into the Anthony Schatz profile? Well, it didn't fade it out. He was convicted of what, 34, 35 counts? Not that we have any information of that right now.
Can you speak to the timing of today's sentence? Christmas is 5 days away. This is an emotional time of year for a lot
Sure.
of folks, and you've lost people and this kind of thing.
There's no significance in my mind to the timing. Once a person is convicted, they have a right to be sentenced within 30 days. And so I think the timing just was to try to get it in before the holidays because a lot of people do have time off and and the courthouses are closed. So there's no significance in my mind to the timing, but that it worked in everyone's schedule.
I just mean that it's the time of year when people are with people they love. And these 2 little girls are not with their families today.
I'm not sure I understand your question, but yeah, regardless of the time of the year, I imagine it's hard for the family to not be with the victims any day, whether it's somebody's birthday or somebody's anniversary, the other holidays we have out throughout the year. You know, Christmas is probably especially difficult. again, I don't expect this verdict or the sentence to bring peace to the Patties, the Germans, or the Williams. I don't know what at this point could ever bring peace to a family member that loses a child or a parent that loses a child. What I hope is what I said. I hope it's a sigh of relief that this portion is over and that the conviction as it is now stands and that he's been sentenced to the maximum possible sentence. I hope that is a sigh of relief for them. And I hope that they now, like Superintendent Carter, can continue to heal and start to put this chapter behind them. That's why the plea to the media, please do not recirculate those pictures, because all that does, as Mr. Erskine said in his victim impact statement, it's like a scab or a wound that scabs over that is constantly ripped open. It's a constant reminder that our loved ones are put in this vulnerable position.
Make sure people face criminal charges or any kind of charges if they do publish or share those.
My opinion is if the Indiana code allows criminal charges to be pressed for those kind of thing, if something comes in my office, criminal charges will be pursued if the criminal code allows it.
Superintendent Carter, can you speak to the number of?
Well, he can ask some questions after we're done here. So
Would you concede that there are some holes in this case or things that cannot be explained that you guys were not able to explain?
I'm not going to concede that. No. Go ahead.
The judge spoke today to the defendant's conduct, specifically him rolling his eyes throughout
Sure.
the trial. Your take from your professional perspective, you tried other cases. I'm sure you've watched him throughout the case. What was your reaction down feedback?
It's hard for me to see him because the way we were seated, especially during the trial, we were kind of all crammed. We call it the well. We're kind of all crammed in there. So it's kind of hard for me to focus on him. And the way I try cases is I'm pretty focused on what I'm doing, and I try not to get sucked into the reactions of other people. I like to watch what the jury's reactions to certain things are. And so a lot of the stuff that she commented on, I didn't see from him. What I did notice from him is what I said in my sentencing recommendation, just the lack of remorse and the lack of regret, the lack of emotion, I guess, when the images of the victims are put up on the screen. You know, as a father, when I see those things, and you've probably seen me up here and other places, I get a little emotional about it, and it's hard not to. And so the lack of those things kind of struck me. I didn't see him rolling the eyes of the judge, of course, but obviously never a good thing to do. So those are my comments on that.
What do you think? What piece of evidence, really quick?
Just one more, then I'll be good. Yeah, sorry.
What piece of evidence, like from his demeanor to any parts of your case, what piece of evidence do you think did it for the jury and then to also elicit this maximum sentence? What do you think got us here?
Oh gosh, I don't know what did it for the jury. I think it was a culmination of everything that we had. I think once you start stacking that evidence against him, and as it stacks up, it's hard to say that the defendant isn't bridge guy. And if you can accept that he's bridge guy, you can accept that he's the killer. And that to me is the bottom line. And so.
If you have a message for Richard Allen, you could talk to him face to face right now after all this has been said and done. What would you say to him?
I think I would just echo what the superintendent said and what Sheriff Liggett said and some of the things that were said by the victims' families at court. If he truly wants to apologize to the families and admit to what he's done, now's the time to do that. So.
Can you say today that Carroll County is safer than it was 8 years ago?
I believe so.
What steps have been taken to make it safer?
Well, I think it's safer in the sense that people can have that sigh of relief to say, okay, we got the guy, we got the conviction. And so I think in that sense, it's safer. I've always thought I was born and raised here in Carroll County. I left, of course, to go to college and law school, but then I came back. And so this has always been my hometown. It's been my hometown for 3 generations or 4 generations in my family. And so I've always thought it's a safe place. And the things that Sheriff Liggett said, the thing that the victim said in the sentencing, that wasn't fluff, that we didn't lock our doors and that we knew everybody else. Those are true statements. This is a traditional, small, Midwestern town. And so I think it's always been safe. I think there can be that pressure off of people now to say, okay, I feel better. We got the guy, we got the conviction, and we know he's going to be in prison for 130 years. So
That'll be it for the questions today and for the press conference. I would just like to say I thank you for coming out. As you go about your day, please remember the most important part of this entire thing And that's the 2 girls that are behind us today. So as you go about your reporting, please do that and have a safe trip home. Thank you.
All right, so let's reactions. Thank you guys. I was muted. Allison screaming that I'm muted. So Erica, what are your reactions?
Well, my first reaction is somebody should have warned me to bring a barf bag. Because I want to vomit after watching all those lies. Patting themselves on the back for framing an innocent man. And most of all, because today's the day I can finally say this out loud. The manipulation, the gaslighting, and the intentional confusion caused by the state of Indiana, those prosecutors, and those cops to the families of Abby and Libby is a main reason why I signed on to this case. And have done it for free, mind you. Go, please approve my invoices so I can get paid for the first time in 2 years. So can Christine. Because we're tired of working this case for free while watching Tony Liggett get a $57,000 raise for arresting an innocent man, and Jerry Holman for getting a promotion and a pay bump for framing an innocent man. We did this work for free, folks. What's that say about us? Putting our lives, our reputations on the line, having everything slaughtered, makes me sick. Nick McClelland, I think he just slipped. I'm going to check it when I get back in front of my computer. But if I just heard correctly, he said they and killers. And I want to go back and confirm that. I'm hoping he slipped. But anyway, we knew it was going to be a pat on the back press conference for framing an innocent man. No justice comes to Abby and Libby at all. And no justice comes to these families because, damn it, Bob, we're going to have to do this again. Those families don't deserve to be put through this a second time. And it makes me sick as a victim's advocate that I had to keep my mouth shut every time I ran into Anna or Carrie or Becky or Mike. I wanted to say to them, I am so terribly sorry for your losses. I'm a victim's advocate. My best friend is the father of a murdered child. But you have been told that Rick did this, and he did not. He did not. I will stake my entire life, my freedom, which appears to also be on the line now, thanks Holman, and my entire career and reputation on Rick Allen's innocence. That is how much I believe in this man and how much of the evidence does not point to him. It points elsewhere. The FBI knew it, state police knew it, and that's why they pushed the FBI out, and that's why they have disparaged the defense team for 2 years. They are terrified that everything we know is about to come out, and by God, it is.
All right. That was great.
I hate this, Bob. You know how I feel about this.
Yeah, I do. So look, like I was reading comments, people are like, pull it up. We have to listen to those kind of press conferences. You know, words matter. And I'm gonna rewatch it at some point. I have never seen a prosecution team and a law enforcement agency or law enforcement officers seem so reticent, so apologetic for the result. It was like they were saying both things. You typically hear just surefire confidence And like, I just didn't get the sense of that during that press conference. Like, I did not, like, this is one of the rare cases that I can remember where kind of like a majority of the people out there are like, they got the right guy. Thank God. Thank God that's over. Like, you just don't get the sense. And there's plenty of cases that are out there where people think that people were wrongfully convicted, and the people that think that Allen are guilty, they're dug in. The people that believe that he's innocent, they're dug in. But I'm talking about from the perspective of the state. I just don't feel that overwhelming confidence in their voices and in their words that you typically hear. So that was kind of my takeaway from it. It like, there was just a lot of finger pointing, a lot of kind of talking about how people were coming at them and we're not liars, and like getting that strangely defensive was strange to me.
Is Mike still on? Is Mike still on with us?
He is.
I am still here.
Okay. Mike, I don't want to slip and say something I'm not supposed to say, but I'm hoping you caught that reference to the leaks that he mentioned just now while patting himself on the back for framing an innocent man. And if there's something that might be able to be said about that, I would defer to you.
Yeah, I actually, thanks. I actually wanted to say something about the leaks. And you know, I thought it was terrible that Doug Carter tried to lay Fortson's life at the feet of Brad and Andy. There is an email out there where he acknowledged in February of 2023 that there were crime scene photos out there already. The prosecutor's podcast mentioned there were crime scene photos out there in January of 2023. There is evidence out there that Nick McClelland knew about crime scene photos being out there 4 or 5 days before he claimed he first knew they were out there. What happened with the leak, I think, is very murky. I really have no idea where those photographs came from that appeared on October 4th of 2023. They could have come from Westerman. They could have come from any number of other people. I want people to remember that at the contempt hearing, Brad Rosie was shown a photograph by Nick McClelland that he said he had never seen before. And I also want to point out to people that without any power to do so, once the crime scene photos were out there on October 4th, that Gull said that she would hold anybody in contempt who didn't delete them or didn't hand them over. And she had no power to do that. Basically, once the cat's out of the bag, she doesn't have any power except over the parties to the case. But Jerry Holman used that authorization from Gull to threaten Fortson. So laying Fortson's really sad death at the feet of Brad and Andy is terrible. It is just not true. And I guess that's what I want to say about the leaks. If people have questions about it, fine. But I think that all those facts are accurate.
Yeah, and so when one or another are speaking, I'm going to mute you. That gets rid of the feedback. I have to be honest. I find that the topic of the leak of the crime scene photos being brought up at this juncture on this day just to be so bizarre. And I've been trying cases for an awfully long time, and I cannot recall. And I understand the horrific nature of the crime scenes. Believe me, I do, but I cannot recall any case where the prosecutor's office has been so adamant about keeping the crime scene photos out of the public eye. And I get the concept of not wanting the victims' families to ever have to be exposed to those things. I mean, just the fact, like, I really do. Like, I couldn't even imagine. But to me, when I kind of look at the coverage of cases across this country forever, I mean, we're always exposed to crime scene photos. You know, like I've just never seen it where, and it was interesting because McClellan had filed a motion this morning in advance of the sentencing, which I don't know if Judge Gull granted or denied, asking to seal the crime scene photos so that they can, you know, when people start sending FOIA requests out, which I have a feeling is going to be legion in this case. I think people have already sent out FOIA requests as soon as the gag was lifted. You know, whether or not they're going to get those FOIA returns that they're hoping for, I highly doubt. But I don't know. To me, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I just it's one of those things where, you know, when the media starts digging in and starts reporting post conviction, you know, I mean, crime scene photos are typically released to the public, you know, but maybe I'm wrong about it. I don't know. It's just strange to me that it was such a large part of today.
Well, there are two things about that. One, I mean, one's the leak, and bringing up the leak is, you know, just another attempt to trash Brad and Andy and Jennifer Auger. I mean, Brad and Andy, because Jennifer wasn't on the case then, and really, you know, they got their conviction, they got their sentence. I don't know why they have to, inaccurately, in my view, attempt to trash the lawyers again. But as for release of the crime scene photos, yeah, it's two children. I mean, I probably would have no problem with sealing, you know, pictures that include the bodies, but you know, sealing them all, that doesn't. I don't understand that. And by the way, I'm working on a case where, you know, you all think these crime scene photos are bad. I mean, this is, you know, 3 people shot in a house. I can tell you, those are gruesome. You know, this is really nothing. So I don't know what the furor about the crime scene photos is, except, you know, one inference to be drawn is that if the public were to see the crime scene photos, they would understand that the state's case made no sense.
Yeah. Well, that was certainly the inference that I've taken. And again, it flies in the face of, you know, this concept that you don't want the victims' families to be exposed to these photos. You certainly don't want them floating around online. But in terms of trying to feel secure about a verdict in this case, those crime scene photos in particular are so critical in reaching a conclusion as to what may have gone on in this crime. Those crime scene photos in this case, more than most, really contain a lot of clues. It's just like that's kind of where you have this dilemma with it. Like you don't want them getting out to the public because you don't want the families to ever have to see that ever. Like you don't want them to be re-traumatized. You truly don't. However, if you're of the mindset that something else happened here, I don't know how to resolve that conflict. I really don't. I don't, because it's not as simple. It's not as simple as saying, because I am, despite what people may say about me in terms of like, oh, Bob kept saying the crime scene photos weren't that big of a deal, and misconstruing that I was saying in terms of Richard Allen's ability to get a fair trial. I didn't think that they had gotten out to the public at large to where his rights in with respect to that issue alone had been affected. I thought that they would still be able to impanel a jury that hadn't been exposed to those crime scene photos, because, as I've said a million times, no defense attorney ever wants that type of crime scene photo to get out to the public leading up to trial. It doesn't help the defense. All it does is incite the public. It makes the public believe that the person that's in custody needs to pay for it. People lose the sense of objectivity when they're exposed to that kind of violence against two young, beautiful girls. So, that concept was that, look, in terms of his fair trial, the leak wasn't as such that the entire world saw the photos. I never saw the photos personally until I sat in at trial. I mean, that was granted. I was, people said, hey, do you want to see them? I'm like, no, we don't want to see them. I have no reason to see them. I'm not trying the case, so the first time I laid eyes on them was during trial, when we all did. And, for me, some of the faraway shots were telling. That was the first time I got to kind of lay eyes on these stick formations. I like, if I could have taken the girls and power, or what do they call it when you change the photos, photoshopped the girls out of it and just left the stick formations, I would have happily have done that, because that's where my interest lies in terms of what the crime scene looked like, not so much what the girls look like. You know what I mean? So
Can I make a sort of technical point? And I don't know what Rick's appellate lawyer is going to do, but one thing I've been doing for the last bit of time, and this is something that sealing the crime scene photos could affect. One thing I've been doing is, we don't have page limitations; it's word limitations and briefs. And I can tell you, I've been putting graphics into the briefs so that the appellate judges, and even trial judges, I've done it in trial pleadings too, so they don't have to go look at the record. So I mean, if a picture is important enough, or a piece of transcript is important enough, I cut and paste or copy and paste the picture into the brief. And if the crime scene photos are sealed, that could be a problem.
yeah, I mean, that's kind of what my larger point is. I mean, in terms of the arguments to the appellate court, I think what you're suggesting is absolutely critical, because you don't know, like, just so people understand in terms of what the record is, the appellate court there's going to be a record that's going to be put together. It's obviously going to be the transcripts, and the evidence that was introduced and admissible at trial. And, I mean, they have to look at those photographs in order to determine whether or not the defense's theory had legs in terms of, the third party culprit. You know, I mean, it just, when you see them, it is a very unusual crime scene. Let me just put it that way. Like I am no expert on anything relating to ritualistic crime scenes, but it was very, very odd. It struck me as odd when you sit there and try to kind of work through the logistics of the placement of the girls and kind of wrap your mind around the concept of one person doing it. It's really hard to land on that it was one person that did all that, you know, because it wasn't as simple as, I mean, bodies were moved. I mean, there's no question that Libby's body was moved. Like, that is unequivocal. There is no way that anybody can look at those crime scene photos or understand the nature of the crime scene and not understand that Libby was moved. And now, you know, so I mean, it's those things are all going to be on the table for the appellate court. I mean, Michael, in terms of the appellate process, what are, and I know you're a habeas guy, but like, what do you think the chances, as far as I see, the biggest issue with the direct appeal is going to be whether or not the appellate court is able to kind of get over the hump and look at the confessions for what they were and understand that kind of totality of the circumstances argument that Rosie made with respect to that this was not a traditional interrogation wherein those confessions could be deemed involuntary, but it was a totality of the circumstances. It was the conditions of his confinement. It was everything that they did over the course of months that got him to the point where he was either very suggestible in the sense that, hey, you want your wife to come visit you, you want to get out of this hellhole. It's pretty simple, man. Just tell us you did it. And that's when you hear, I did it. I did. You know what I'm saying? If they can get over that hump, because if they don't get over that hump, you know, the concept being that they're going to deem everything else to be harmless error because of the weight of those confessions in the minds of the jurors.
Yeah, I disagree. I don't think I mean, you sound like you're really talking about the suppression of the confessions. And, that's a sort of totality of the circumstances thing. But I feel it a little differently, and that is that I don't think that there's really a good case to be made for the suppression of the statements, at least not the way it was made. And I've said that before, that the the defense went for coercion. There was some mention of voluntariness, but their argument was really coercion. I think there might be a good argument that they were involuntary. The way I see it is, can you undermine, and they did a good job of it, can you undermine the credibility of the confessions sufficiently so that court on appeal doesn't say that these other constitutional errors were harmless beyond a reasonable doubt because of the confessions? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, and I wasn't really talking about the suppression of it, because that's a completely different issue. I was just saying, in terms of, that's how it was argued by Rosie, and I think you and I had a pretty detailed conversation about that. But I think you got to the bigger question, which is the appellate court going to give those confessions the weight that the state believes that they carry? Because ultimately, when they're looking at it, and for them not to, they have to look at the conditions of the confinement, right? I mean, it's like, they're not going to be able to reach that conclusion without looking at what happened leading up to those confessions being made by Alan during that 3-month period of time. So, because I mean, like, the bottom line is, if they feel that no matter what the defense had put on, all of the third party culprit stuff, and everything that they could dig up that would seem to lead towards reasonable doubt, that none of those things are going to outweigh those confessions in terms of what the jury would have ended up doing. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's not the test, though. The test isn't whether it would have outweighed it. It's whether the test for what I think are pretty clearly constitutional errors in the trial. The test is going to be whether those errors were harmless beyond a reasonable doubt. And the only way you get there is through the confessions. I mean, my memory, as you said, you're going to go look at the press conference again. My recollection of the press conference now is that Nick McClelland said that his entire case was, well, if you can believe Rick Allen was bridge guy, then you can believe he killed the girls. End of story. And he didn't say a word about the confessions.
Yeah, nobody talked about the confessions up there.
And that's at least interesting.
Yeah, I mean, none of them even mentioned the confessions.
That's at least interesting. I mean, I'm a prosecutor. I'm a prosecutor. I'm not going to the picture of the bridge at the press conference. I'm going to, we got the right guy, people. He confessed. Oh, did we lose Bob? Uh-oh, I'm out.
Oh, sorry. I'm still here.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and again, I Erica is much more versed in, after 2 years, is much more versed in the fact. I'm not willing to go to the corruption story. It may well exist. And as admissible evidence, if admissible evidence emerges to prove it, I will be all behind it. But for me, I mean, she's seen the evidence, and we haven't really talked about it. So I'm not saying she's wrong. All I'm saying is I always come from the perspective that, I don't start with corruption and then go out to try and prove it. It's always, if it emerges from the evidence, I'll get behind it. But more or less, I assume people are acting in good faith until I have evidence to prove otherwise.
Is this where you want me to say something, Bob? Because I can. Want to be careful here because I don't want to tip our hand.
Yeah, it's your stage, Erica. I mute you because when Michael's talking, like, we get feedback, I think because it's coming through your phone.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I'm in a good area now, so hopefully that will subside. Like I started to say, I don't want to tip our hand, and I can't tip our hand to newly discovered information. But as it pertains to the timeline of how things occurred, Kathy had a very bad feeling when Rick was first approached back in 2022 with additional questions. And she was smart enough to make sure that that information was captured. And we have possession of that information. And the reason I am comfortable saying that there is corruption involved is because I have seen the discovery, the timeline, the docket, and the information that no one else knows exists but our team. And I am confident that's why certain members of our defense team are being viewed as a bigger threat right now than others. Everybody played a part on this team. Everybody had a specific role. And I happen to be the gal who has a long history of being an investigative reporter in Indiana, of working in media in Indiana, of having relationships and understanding and working other cases and having crossed police officers in other cases and picked up on things that might not ordinarily stick out. It's just the nature of my work. It's the nature of that skill set. And what emerged for me very clearly early on was that Rick Allen, Rick made two mistakes on the 26th, and I feel horrible that none of us knew, back then how important it was going to be in that moment for Rick to ask for a lawyer. When they first took him in, when he and Kathy went to pick up the car and they decided that they were going to take him in and question him, I just wish Rick in that moment had asked for an attorney, because had he done that, we would not be in this position that we are in today. Okay. And that's all I'll say about that, because we've got some other things that are hinging on that information right now. But I know the egos of Indiana police officers. I know them well. I went to high school with a lot of these guys. Doug Carter is from my home county. Not many people know that Doug Carter actually is born and raised in LaPorte County, where I was born and raised, and that he came up through the ranks with a lot of the people that you saw testify at this trial. And that they're in small town, rural Indiana, police officers are kind of local celebrities, and they're given almost this unhinged authority often. And oftentimes it affects their ego to the extent that they think that they are untouchable. Qualified immunity, our inability to subpoena their records, the protections they receive, so we can't look at their finances and more easily and readily determine which cops are taking bribes, which cops are living on a $50,000 salary but living in a $1 million home. These are real issues that plague the police departments here in the Hoosier State and have since the 1970s. It has been the cause of many police officers going to prison in this state, specifically narcotics officers, Bob. There's a history of narcotics officers going to federal prison in Indiana, and there's a reason for that. But Rick's biggest mistake that day, in my opinion, next to not asking for a lawyer, was saying to Jerry Holman, I didn't do this, and there is nothing you can do that will ever make me say I did. Because in that moment, Bob, Jerry Holman's ego took over, and he said, watch me. I'm gonna prove you did this. You and I both took that quote down when we were sitting at that trial. I'm gonna prove you did this. It wasn't because Rick Allen did it. It was because Jerry Holman had just hung his hat on Rick Allen as the fall guy. And he was going to lose everything if he didn't prove just that. Which is why they then hand-selected officers and psychiatrists and psychologists all from LaPorte County. Nobody's talking about the fact that Dr. Martin is at ISP right here in Michigan City. I'm over in Michigan City right now. Nobody wanted to talk about the fact that Dr. Walla worked for WCC, a LaPorte County facility. Nobody wanted to talk about the fact that Pat Cicero was the blood spatter expert from LaPorte County Sheriff's Office. Nobody wants to talk about how they hand-selected individuals who have a history of questionable behavior in case after case after case. And that's why the gag order existed. It didn't exist to protect those victims, and it sure as hell didn't exist to protect those families. It existed to protect the actions of Jerry Holman and his directives going all the way down the food chain that then resulted in all of this behavior. Would it surprise anyone to know that Jerry Holman's father worked in community corrections for many years?
No.
Would it surprise anyone to know that Jerry Holman's father was then the director of the White County Jail? Go back and look at the beginning. Go back and look at this. Certain things I just want to say, but I refuse to run the risk of hurting Rick.
Yeah, no, I mean, you've got to be careful, you know, because like people just have to understand the appeal is pending. So,
correct.
You know, I mean, like the next step of the process, and understand that a trial is not the end of the process. It's really the middle of the process. You've got pre-trial, and then you've got the trial, and then if there's a conviction, you have, you know, post-conviction, all that portion of the process, and it's the lengthiest and most detailed. You know, and I said the same thing. You know, when we sat in there that day, we watched the two interrogations, both by Mullins and Liggett first, and then with Holman and Rick. You know, you knew walking out of that courtroom that day, at least I knew, that Holman accepted that as a challenge in terms of, all right, they couldn't crack him in two separate interrogations. Like Alan never wavered. There was never any kind of waiver on the part of Rick Allen in terms of like, I didn't do this bullshit. I don't care what you say the evidence is. You're not going to be able to prove this case. And I'm not afraid of it because I didn't do this type of thing. And there's in that exact statement that you said, when he said those words, there's nothing that you can do that will ever make me say that I did this. That like Holman walked out of that room knowing right then and there that number one, he was going to arrest him, and number two, that Allen was never going to confess. And they knew what the strength or weakness of their evidence was at that point. Okay. They knew that there was a high likelihood that they weren't going to get any more evidence against Allen. So getting him to confess was critical at that juncture for them in terms of saying, okay, we have confidence in this case, especially from the prosecutor side of it. You know, if a prosecutor's looking at the evidence that they had, which was the very same evidence that they had at the beginning of when the PCA came out and when it was finally unsealed, it's like you look at it and you're like, all right, this is what they have. I kept telling people, you know, this isn't a situation where the state's going to be holding back the smoking gun evidence for a later time because it serves them no purpose. They needed that thing to come out and have everybody saying, oh shit, they got him. They got him. Oh my God, they got him. The way I feel about the Hewerman stuff, I'm convinced that Rex Hewerman is the person. And it has not gone to trial. Of course, there is a presumption of innocence, but in terms of the strength of the evidence that they've been able to put together in that case, I feel confident that they have the right guy pending trial, if it goes to trial. In this case, I never felt like that. And I knew that they were going to have to get those confessions. And that's where it gets interesting. That's where what happens starting on the 28th of October, after he's taken into confession, and he starts getting moved around, moving into the safekeeping hearing that Rick Allen was not present at, where Rick Allen was not represented by counsel, or actually he was, but that counsel was not notified that hearing was taking place. And then Rick Allen is transferred to the hellhole, Westville, the worst place you could stick him. He's in the most secure cell, in the most secure prison in the state of Indiana, and no one knows about it. And no one knows why. And it's based on not actual threats to his safety. They like to say it was a safekeeping order to keep him safe. They were not able to articulate any specific threat to Richard Allen. It was a concept, and that's not enough. And Richard Allen not being present at that hearing, I mean, when you look at how it all went down, how he ended up there, and when that all comes out, when that all gets laid out for the courts and for the public, for that matter, what happened, how this thing went down, it's going to really be opening a lot of eyes.
Okay, so I'm so glad you brought that up. I'm so glad you said when he was arrested on the 28th, because I was driving. I'm stopped now. I was driving. We were speaking earlier, and one of the things that Brad asked for today from Go, and she acknowledged it. And when he asked that question, I took a deep breath, grabbed Matt Hoffman's hand, and went, "Just say yes, Gold. Just say yes." And she did. We got what we wanted. Because what Brad asked for today was for the record to be corrected, that Rick Allen was not arrested on the 28th. He was arrested on the 26th.
Correct.
And I can assure people that is pivotal to the timeline. It is pivotal to the timeline of when Rick and or Kathy first asked for counsel, first retained counsel. There's a lot we can't talk about right now because it's new. But
he was taken into custody that day. Like, he never left the police station.
And they keep trying to say he was arrested on the 28th, and he was not. And I was so proud of Brad today for getting that corrected on the record. It needed to be corrected based on new information. It had to be, because that is a pivotal correction for us moving forward. Rick Allen was detained on the 26th at approximately noon, and he never left.
Never left.
And if they want to tell you that he was arrested on the 28th, they're lying about that like they're lying about everything else.
All right. So if you're late to the stream, Erica Morse is a victims advocate and a private investigator, and she was one of the private investigators working with the defense team. Just so you guys know, Michael Osbrook is a Indiana attorney, specializes in habeas work, which is post-conviction work. And what Michael Osbrook does is win. So that's what he does. Just so you guys have an idea of who our two guests are. Michael, and I don't know what you're able to say at this point, what you're not, but in terms of kind of what we're talking about, do you have any input?
Only, I think Kathy Allen came up walking out of the courthouse with you, came up with the motto, slogan, whatever, it should go on T-shirts. This isn't over at all.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, this is really just beginning from the appellate side of it. So, Erica, try to give me an idea of, I want to have a better understanding, because I wasn't in the courtroom where Jennifer Auger apparently had words with McClelland. I have a feeling that it has to, having not been there, but hearing that Holman got on the stand and basically flamed through the defense, which is just so bizarre to me. Like, during this phase of the trial, the sentencing phase, for them to continue to get up on the stand and continue to cast aspersions against a defense team that was just trying to do their job. I will die on that hill. I will die on that hill. I take umbrage with anybody who's attacking two defense attorneys for doing the best that they could under the circumstances to defend their client. Like, I'll die on that hill. And I have a feeling that Jennifer had some choice words for McClellan for putting Holman on the stand. Do you have any sense of what that conversation was?
I have a slight sense. We all met, you know, after we left the courthouse, we all went to a location and had a kind of a post-hearing meeting. I saw Jen walk over. I saw them exchange words. And then once we got to that post-hearing or that post-meeting, Andy was pretty riled up. I don't know specifically what was said, but whatever was said had Andy so angry that he went out on Twitter and called Jerry Holman a specific name that I'm not going to repeat here, but I'm sure your Twitter followers can find it. He was very angry about what that exchange was. I asked Jen if she was okay and if she had been threatened, because Jen and I have been working on some other stuff, independent. There's so much more to this. You know, none of us are safe right now. And I don't say that from a dramatic standpoint. I say that from a real standpoint. We have ticked off a lot of people. And so whatever it was that was said was upsetting enough that Andy popped off about it. Brad wasn't happy. And I asked Jen if she was okay. And she said, yeah. And I said, were you threatened? And she just kind of rolled her eyes at me. And I'm like, oh, so what? They thought that just because you're a woman, they could try to scare you like they're trying to scare me. And she was like, yeah, something like that. So I don't know. I do know that Holman's testimony today and his efforts to disparage the defense team may work against him. It's my understanding that his behavior was so unusual that it could end up being discussed in future motions. I will defer to the lawyers on that, but we are tired. I will say that as a collective, we are tired. It has been 2 years of watching Rick suffer, watching Kathy suffer, watching Brittany and Jan and Kent suffer. They have become family to us, as you know, Bob. They become family to you and Allie. And they're just really good people who don't deserve to be going through this. And to have our own names being disparaged, to have our own families being put through hell because we're just out there doing our jobs. And in this particular case, we are doing a job that we all believe in wholeheartedly. No one will ever convince me that Rick Allen did this because I've seen the evidence. It's just all there is to it. And I know, have a pretty good idea who's responsible. And it's not Rick. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time. He took a walk on a bridge on a nice day. And the techniques that were used against him and his wife on October 26th, trying to make it appear as though she didn't believe him, as though she was astonished by certain things. That's one of the things I have to clear up, because it was hit on so many times at trial. Kathy's reaction to Rick being out on the bridge and the platform. Kathy is terrified of this bridge. Terrified.
Can I interrupt for a second?
Yep.
And I mean, one of the unfortunate lessons in this also for people is, you were saying, Bob, that in Rick's interviews, especially with Holman, but also with Mullen earlier, I think that was the 22nd, maybe. Rick was unequivocal. He had nothing to do with it. He was mad. He was And look what the prosecution did anyway. They tried to cherry pick some statements out of his absolute declaration of innocence to make him look guilty. And I mean, what a terrible lesson. Like, never talk to or try to help law enforcement. Just don't do it. Because if they decide you're the person, they'll take even your unequivocal declarations of innocence and having nothing to do with something and turn them against you.
I agree.
That's all. That's all I got, and I gotta get out. I gotta get out and get going and do some things. I have enough time to answer any. If somebody's got some specific questions, I'm still hanging. I'm happy to answer them.
Here, there's a couple. So this for the panel. Who do you guys question first, Jay Abbott or Doug Carter? And then Erica or Michael, do you know how many resources Indiana State Police put into investigating defense witnesses? Do you know the answer to either of those questions?
No.
I do not. I do not. I wouldn't be surprised if they were investigating our witnesses. We were advised not to, investigate theirs clearly because that can be viewed as witness tampering or witness intimidation. So, we didn't do that. We did our jobs and that was that. And I don't know, but I would not be surprised. Because they'll do whatever they have to do to protect their secrets in this case, and their secrets in this case are many.
Okay, and one thing that I know for certain is, and it came out at trial, is for instance, the defense did depositions of 70 different individuals, 70 plus. In contrast, in stark contrast to that, the state deposed 2 people, and that includes all witnesses, lay people, expert witnesses. The state has the opportunity to depose anybody that they want that's listed on the defense's witness list, and they chose not to. It was something that arose quite a bit during trial, which I thought was very curious, especially in relation to the defense's experts. Typically, if you have the opportunity to be able to depose the defense's experts, you're definitely going to do that because it's helpful going into trial, having that person given sworn testimony one time already. That way, if you can impeach them with their prior inconsistent statements, if they made them during that deposition. So there's a lot of reasons that you would want to depose witnesses. And I found that was striking. So while we can't answer that question specifically, I think the fact that they allocated their time in different ways as opposed to really looking into what the defense's experts were going to say or the witnesses that they were going to call, what they were going to say. They elected not to do that. And I think a lot of that comes from this comfort level that they had from the gatekeeper of this trial, and that was Judge Gull. I think that they had great confidence in Judge Gull keeping many, many things out prior to trial, such as the third-party culprit. I think that a huge collective sigh of relief happened from the prosecution team when she came down with that ruling. That cleared their plate of so much. That cleared that took so much off their plate in terms of the prosecution of what they would have had to contend with at trial, that I think that they had a comfort level that they wouldn't have had otherwise. All right, Michael, what about this?
Let me comment about the depositions real quick.
Okay.
I take your point about the experts. On the other hand, McClelland would have had the reports of the defense experts, and they would have shown those reports to their experts, and their experts would have said, yeah, here's how you respond to them. So maybe they didn't, they weren't concerned about the experts after talking to their defense experts after talking to their experts, so they didn't need to depose them. The other thing is, every one of those 70 depositions that the defense did is also a prosecution deposition because they're there. I mean, if you look at the state's case, if you think it's Rick Allen alone, you don't need to depose anybody. He did this alone. I mean, I'm not sure that the imbalance in the depositions indicates anything except the difference. I mean, it goes to what you said, their comfort level with the evidence they had, but there was no more evidence to be gotten.
Right. And I don't think that they felt the need based on what they knew was going to be admissible and what they knew was going to be inadmissible at trial to really have to deal with any of those types of issues. I mean, it's like you said, I mean, essentially what ended up working out for them was that their case in chief was going to be the only thing that was going to be presented to the jury. You know, I mean, that's how it shook out. You know, there were really no surprises for them. And in terms of, I can't remember, there were two experts that didn't prepare reports, written reports, and where Rosie had made the statement that's where I heard where the number of deps that were done, where Brad Rosie had said, well, you know, Your Honor, the state's claiming ignorance as to this issue or what this witness's opinion was going to be, but they had the opportunity to depose the witness and they elected not to do that. So all right, let's move on from that. Michael, can you answer this question up on the screen? How does all the untested DNA work? Can it still be tested? And at what point of the process?
Yeah, interesting question. The answer is, so when you say DNA evidence, there's sort of two things. Now, to the extent that there's actual biological evidence, obviously that's going to have DNA and that's testable. If you have objects, then what you have to do, it's a two-step thing. You've got to see if there is testable DNA on it. But the answer is yes. I mean, in theory, you can certainly do all of that. And the stage at which you're going to do that is typically it would be in the post-conviction case, not the direct appeal. I do want to say something I don't think I've gotten at before, that one of the fascinating things about this case to me is if you think about the timeline of the investigation. So, you know, the murders happened in February of 2017, and for 2 years, basically the investigation goes nowhere. People are spending a lot of time, tips coming in, people doing stuff, but they're so stymied that they feel like they need to take a different direction, right? And the different direction they're going to take is they're going to put up the picture of young bridge guy having had old bridge guy out there. And then you have Doug Carter saying they're the same person, losing credibility forever. And I'm just wondering, I mean, you know, you're a defense lawyer, Bob. You're an investigator, Erica. It seems to me that the immediate thing to do, if you've been stymied for 2 years, if you're not going to do it immediately, if you've been stymied for 2 years, you're going to go out and say, hey, we've got all this DNA that we can test for. Why don't we do that and see what happens? You know, when you've got this, you know, potentially powerful evidence out there that you haven't examined, you know, to switch from one sketch to another and take a new direction, I don't understand that and never will.
Yeah, we've had many conversations about that, not on lives, but yeah, it's kind of it's perplexing a little bit. So now let me ask you this as kind of a follow-up. If the issue was not raised, because typically in Illinois, if there's a particular piece of evidence that we as the defense want tested and the state has, for whatever reason, is elected not to test it, and we typically will file a motion requesting that that piece of evidence either be tested or turned over to the defense in order to have our experts test it, and whatever that may entail in terms of getting that done. But, you know, we put something on the record that we are asking that we think it could be potentially exculpatory, and we want to test it. And then we let the judge make a ruling, but we've then perfected the issue for appeal in the event that there's a conviction. Now, if that was not done in this case, which it was not, how does that affect the ability to get that evidence tested moving forward?
Well, it could be tested in the post-conviction case. I mean, it's not going to be tested as part of the appeal. The appeal is going to be on the record as it exists at the time the notice of appeal was filed. So it would have to be in the post-conviction case.
Right. So, which leads me into, and I know you got to go, but like, so that you answered it perfectly, which I knew you would. So when do we get to post-conviction? When, and you were on the last live when you were on with us, you and Carol were on together, and there's a little bit of an internal debate with some very bright people about kind of the path in which this post-conviction work should take. And I think that you're of the mindset that the post-conviction work should maybe take precedent here, but just explain to people the difference real briefly between an appeal, a directed appeal, and post-conviction.
Yeah, sure. And I don't think there was any debate about the two paths the case could take. It was only, I think there was debate about which paths the case should take.
Correct. That is what the debate was. Correct.
And reasonable people can disagree about that. Well, the normal path would be either a motion to correct error, no motion to correct error, and then you'd file a notice of appeal, assuming the motion to correct error, if one's filed, is denied. And then it goes up on a direct appeal. It's decided, a year and a half or two from now. Probably a year and a half, something like that. And then if Rick loses in the direct appeal, then you file a post-conviction petition to investigate all the stuff that wasn't done at trial. Newly discovered evidence is one of the major claims. There are some other claims you typically raise in the post-conviction petition, but I won't go into the list. And then you reinvestigate the case, basically. But another way you can do it is sort of after the notice of appeal is filed, case goes to the Court of Appeals, and what you do is you ask the Court of Appeals to suspend the direct appeal so that you can pursue post-conviction work immediately.
Right.
And so what happens is you can still raise later all the issues that you had in the direct appeal. But if you lose in the post-conviction case, you can also raise the issues coming out of the post-conviction case. So what you do is you have both you have a direct appeal and a post-conviction appeal together. And one of the advantages of getting on the post-conviction work early is, and by the way, this is a procedure. It's called the Davis-Hatton procedure after a couple cases now. it's very rarely used, and there are very few cases that it really is appropriate for. I think there's a strong case to be made that Rick Allen's case is one of those cases, and I'm not alone in that, but there's certainly other people who think it's not, and I not my decision. One effect it would have would be, I mean, if you think that there's a hugely strong case to be made in the direct appeal without the post-conviction case, it would delay the direct appeal being decided by a good bit of time. And so if you're in a hurry and you have extreme confidence in the direct appeal, then you might not want to do this Davis-Hatton procedure and go straight to post-conviction work. I think Rick has extremely strong issues in the direct appeal. It's never a foregone conclusion, even if you have really strong issues in direct appeal. And I think one of the things that makes me lean towards the Davis-Hatton procedure to suspend the appeal is I just think that 2-3 years from now, a lot of this evidence, some of it will be gone, some of the witnesses will be dead. And there's another view too that's a very reasonable one, and that is that for post-conviction work, sometimes it's a better thing for a case to percolate for a while. I think somebody once put it, and that is that things are still pretty new and still pretty raw, but in 2 years or 3 years, who knows what people might be willing to talk about that they're not willing to talk about now? Who knows what Brady claims may float to the surface that haven't now? When people have forgotten about this case in 3 years, what will law enforcement forget that they forgot? What will law enforcement forget that they didn't turn over to you that they do turn over then? People will make, what Erica was saying about listening for mistakes people were making. Well, 2 or 3 years from now, people are going to have forgotten about a whole lot of stuff, and they're even more likely to make mistakes. So I mean, there are differing views on the right course to take. I think with all the DNA evidence out there, if you can get the right people involved, pursuing the post-conviction case now has some huge advantages and clearly some disadvantages. And all I can do is air my point of view and let the people who are going to make the decision make the decision.
Yeah, and like you said aptly, there are very strong issues for the direct appeal, which makes it more challenging. I mean, many times, in your direct appeal, you look at it on its face and that there's nothing powerful there. There's nothing that's going to, in particular, that could sway the appellate court, because like you said, there is, much like today was a foregone conclusion that we all knew that Gull was going to give them the max. Appeals are never that, no matter how devastating you believe that the issues are in your favor. You can never count your chickens before you hatch with respect to appeal. So, and which was what makes what you were just talking about such a perplexing conversation and decision ultimately on which way to go, because everything that you said is true. I mean, and we're not just talking about the length of the process now, but I mean, this case is 7-8 years old. We're already talking about memories that are already being lost. We're talking about people that have gotten 7-8 years older, so I mean, when you have that fear of losing people who may have important information or have recollections of things that are critical, and the possibility that they're going to pass away is a very real concern. you know, and the other thing about this case, and Eric is going to be able to talk about it better than anyone, is just the sheer amount of discovery that was tendered from the prosecution to the defense, and not only the amount, but in the fashion that was tendered, not once but twice. People cannot forget that when Brad and Andrew were removed from the case, they had to tender everything back to them being the state, which they did. And then when they got reinstated, it all got tendered back to them. And any work that they had done in terms of trying to organize 15, 16 terabytes of information was lost. So and they're going through the battle of, we're worried about Rick Allen surviving until trial. We feel like we need to rush this to trial. I mean, and the question becomes for Erica, I mean, is it even feasible to think that there's any way possible that the defense team, which includes you, were able to get through all of the discovery?
So I would like to think that we have viewed every one of the millions of pages. And I think that we are still finding things that were buried and intentionally buried. And, you know, in some of my conversations with Mike, we just uncovered something, just one little, the way this thing was intentionally labeled was to me, as someone who has organized evidence and organized reports for lawyers, it seemed intentional, that it was done in such a way that it was meant to seem very unimportant to us. But then when I located this particular PDF last week, it became a critical piece of some of this newly discovered information. The way this discovery was organized was intentionally disorganized. There were cover sheets that had tips on them that didn't match the next page. So if you're looking for a tip on John Doe, and then you know, the cover sheet says John Doe, and you go to page 2 and you're expecting a 5-page report about John Doe, well, then all of a sudden it's Jane and Jan Doe, and you're going, wait a minute, where's the case number that matches with this tip sheet? And there were a lot of concerns that, you know, when a tip is cleared, you're supposed to see the word cleared at the bottom of it, and then a next step, once it's been cleared, it's been filed. There were tips that weren't cleared, guys, just plain and simple tips that were never cleared.
Hey, I'm gonna interrupt. I'm gonna get off and let Erica talk about the juicy.
Okay. I thought you were stopping me. I thought I almost said something wrong there.
No.
Well, now that Michael's gone, we'll be able to spill it all. See you, Michael. Take care now.
I'll call you later, Mike.
Bye. Thanks for jumping on, Michael. We appreciate
you. But in terms of that discovery, it was massive. It had to be pieced out. You know, that's why there were so many investigators on this team. And when you talk about, you know, just the number of investigators, everybody had to really look at their skill set. You know, what is Erica's skill set? Well, Erica knows police corruption and investigative tips and interviewing and all of this stuff, and, you know, tends to be an encyclopedia of cold cases and open cases in the state of Indiana. So I took all those tips, you know, those tips and the investigative leads were mine. Well, we had another investigator, you know, who you know, Bob. She went to med school. And so her background is a little bit more in the biology, the science, the chemistry, things like that. And that proved to be vital to some of the questions and some of the issues that were then raised about how many times the family's DNA had to be collected and recollected. We generally don't see a family's DNA being collected 5 different times and never tested. But we did in this case. Why did we have a hair that was in Abigail's hands that had not been tested. That issue was raised by one of our defense investigators a year and a half ago, and nobody could come up with an answer, Wyatt. And so it's just amazing to me the links that we're going to intentionally provide us disorganized evidence to make it harder for us to do our jobs. Listen, we're not asking for our jobs to be made easier. We're asking to be on equal footing.
Right.
And
Leland had said, and you were in there, you know, he's like, I'm not going to do the job for the defense by organizing all of their discovery, which is not what they were asking. It's not what you guys were asking.
Well, I don't understand why a volunteer organized our discovery. Because now we can say it. Why did Kathy Shanks organize our discovery, damn it? Just saying.
Yeah.
Just saying. I got problems there, Bob, and you know it.
Yeah.
Lots of problems with that one. I think that tip didn't magically land at the bottom of that filing cabinet 20 days before the election. We can go into all that later. I'm just, in terms of answering your question about discovery, it was intentionally disorganized. It was intentionally misleading. It was intentionally confusing. And then because the day that we were all fired off the case, we got a group text message saying, stop working. Don't touch your discovery. We're appealing this ruling. We're trying to stay on the case. Rick and Kathy want us to stay on, but effective this moment, we cannot work this case. We cannot, you guys can't investigate. We can't defend. Okay. So then we lost that critical time. Discovery had to be given back. Then we win back the right to stay on the case. And that's the day that everybody on this team agreed that we may never see a dime of payment for our year's worth of work. And you know, the text is going around. Are you guys all in? Hell yeah, we're all in. Rick's innocent. You know, that's just how it is. And then we get the discovery back. And all of that work, as you said, all of that work that had been done to organize those files and get us on track had then been intentionally disorganized. You know, the violations that took place here are just, And then when you saw, I mean, you were sitting next to me when people were commenting to me how disgusting it was that Holman would turn around and look at me and wink at me or lick his lips or blow me a kiss. This felt so petty and so childish. We were in a murder trial for 2 tender age victims. And the lead cop on this case was baiting defense investigators. Every time he could. It was disgusting. It was disrespectful. It was petty. And it speaks to his behavior throughout this entire case. And that's why, from my perspective, this feels so personal. You know, if I thought for 1 second that Rick was guilty, I wouldn't have taken it. I wouldn't have signed on. I wouldn't have put my own family through this hell. I wouldn't have put my own self through this hell. I wouldn't be looking at all of these, you know, extenuating issues and legal issues that I'm suddenly having in the last year. And, but damn it, at what point do we stand up and say, no more of this, Bob? Kathy doesn't deserve this. Rick doesn't deserve this. Jan, Kent, Brittany. But my God, Abby and Libby's families don't deserve this, Bob. They think they got justice. They sat there and screamed at an innocent man. And what do they want him to do? Apologize for crimes he did not commit? Absolutely not. Take responsibility for what? A walk on a bridge? Any one of us is Rick Allen. And that's why it terrifies me so much. Because every single one of us in the state of Indiana is now subject to being treated the way Ricky has been treated because this precedent has been set. It has to change, Bob. It has to stop. And we have to correct this error immediately. We just have to.
Yeah, I like buckle up, like like the fight's just beginning from this side of it. So in your last statement about, and it brings me to Lisa had asked a question. Do you think that the defense, because you were in there, missed an opportunity by not having Richard Allen read a statement in allocution and bringing to the court's attention multiple things that were not allowed in trial?
We spent all week having this discussion as a team. And I spent a lot of hours with Kathy this week having this discussion as to whether or not, I called Andy on Monday and said, do you want the families to write letters? Did you want the family, Rick's family, to write letters? And he said, why? Asking for mercy for an innocent man? Why are we going to put this family through this? And Gull wouldn't consider it anyway. She sat there today and said that any of all of the mitigating factors that we brought forth, she didn't consider any of them. She didn't care. So it really did become an issue of how much are we willing to put this family through and continue to put them through. Rick, I don't know what the right call was. I didn't go to law school. I went to journalism school, and I defer to the lawyers on my team who have fought this case with heart and soul and vigor and with all of the crap that we have taken along the way. And to have Rick stand up and say to Gull, I didn't do this, she would have said, yeah, you did. A jury convicted you. I just don't see how it would have helped. I just don't. And I thought I was the one fighting earlier in the week for the family to write letters, for Rick to stand up and say something. And as we had these conversations, and then I heard what I heard today and I watched what I watched, there was no point. It's like you said, there was no point to put Holman on the stand to disparage our work other than to give him the satisfaction of saying, not only did I frame an innocent man, but I get to talk crap about the people who had the audacity to defend my behavior. I'm done with the gaslighting. I'm done with the manipulation. We have to win this on an appeal by showing just how dirty they were. And they were dirty.
Yeah. In my perspective, there was nothing to gain by having Rick make a statement in allocution. And I was glad that you were able to articulate that, this was, because there's going to be the narrative that's put out there that, oh, Kathy and Jan and the family didn't even come. They're now not supporting Rick. Like that. That's not what happened. Like the thought was what Kathy told me flat out. She's like, we reject the verdict. We reject the sentence. We're not going to come in there. We're not going to allow them to abuse us. They were concerned on many different fronts. So from the side of that, I understood completely. I was intending on coming. And then when Kathy told me that I texted her, I'm like, are you going to the sentencing yesterday? She's like, no. And then she told me why. And I said, well, I'm out then. Solidarity. And it's like, like, did I want to be in there to kind of hear it? Like, thankfully I had you in there so that I could have you on to kind of tell us to be the eyes and the ears in there. And I'm probably going to want you back on when you can look at your notes and kind of like, we can sit and kind of talk about some of the details. Cause I do want to hear some of the details because we're going to get a very one-sided affair, I think, from a lot of the creators that were in there. And I know that Lauren over at Hidden True Crime is, she was there, and she's very, very pro Alan's guilt. So I mean, people are going to gear their content towards what they believe is their truth. So, as far as that question, I don't think that they lost an opportunity. And there's another narrative that exists out there that Rick Allen is dying to confess, and that he really did want to apologize to the families, and that it's Brad and Andy that aren't allowing him to do that he didn't want to go to trial, and it's his attorneys that forced him to go to trial. I mean, that's a narrative out there. That's a narrative out there by lawyers that are saying it.
Who the hell came up with that crap? Give him my number, Bob. Give him my number, because that never happened. Andy and Brad and Jen. Shit. No. Rick has never come to us and said he wants to confess. Rick's never changed his stance on his innocence. Nobody on this team has ever pressured him to do something that we thought he should do that was against his best interests. Again, it's been really hard to be gagged because, our lives have been trashed all over the place. But to also not be able to correct the record on behalf of our client. And that's what mattered most. We have the thick skin. We're built to do this work. But to be able to say, why didn't they have Kathy testify? Or, what was this? My God, we don't know what they did to him in there. We still don't have a full understanding of what they did to him in there. You and I talked about this when it was coming time to decide whether or not Rick was going to testify. Do you remember me telling you my number one fear was that Walla may have hypnotized him, and that I was terrified that there was going to be a trigger word or something that was going to set Rick off? Like, I was just so scared about what they have done to him and to his mentality. And I think that every decision that was made from about the halfway point of that trial on, once we saw there was no fair trial to be had, because in the beginning of that trial, it looked like maybe she was going to start to play fair just a hair. Remember, we had some objections that we won, and we're all like gearing up and, okay, wait a minute, maybe this is our time. No. It was so defeating to not be able to put on our case. It was so defeating to have 156 witnesses ready to go and not to be able to call the majority of them, because every time we tried to get a piece of evidence or information in, they were shot down. Like, how many times can you beat people down for doing their jobs and trying to defend a man that we firmly believe is innocent, and we believe the evidence proves he's innocent? How many times are you going to kick those dogs before those dogs find a different way to bite back? It was not in her courtroom. I'm going to stop short of saying, what in the hell is wrong with that woman? I want to know. Did somebody get to her? Because I think they did, Bob. I really think they did. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that ultimately, I think the biggest issue with Gull was that I think that I think she was set on a path of disdain for the defense by the filing of the Franks memo. I think she took exception to it. I think that she believed that it was a workaround of the gag order, and that was the defense. Instead of looking at it in a sense that, okay, they're putting forth this defense, and I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt that they're licensed attorneys who've been each practicing for 20 plus years and have a ton of trial experience and have never been admonished by the Bar Association. They have no, instead of looking at it like that, she chose to look at it like, okay, these two guys are trying to sway public opinion by putting this thing out there, and it's got no legs. So I think that kind of set the course for them. And then when the leak happens, she's then at that point of the mindset that these two guys have to go. No matter which way she's going to do it, she had to get rid of these two lawyers. And then ultimately, I think that when the confessions came out, when she learned that there were confessions, I think that she personally had decided that Alan was the right guy. And I think that, all of her rulings reflected that moving forward, and I obviously could never, like, that's just speculation, like clear speculation based on kind of way that this all played out. Because she's denied on the record that she had any kind of feelings one way or another about the Frank's memo. I don't believe that for a moment. But I don't know. I mean, to me, ultimately, this thing was always going to be, you had, and you saw it right away. You had a prosecution team like they always are. I mean, they're always locked in on their case. You're never going to hear a prosecution team back off of charges once they're knee deep into it. You had like the Morphew case where they made an arrest on that, but they didn't get to the point where the thing was charged. And I mean, he's like, they end up like dismissing the charges because they looked at it and they're like, we don't have enough. Like they didn't have confidence in it in terms of being able to get Barry Morphew convicted. Right. So like, that's a rare case where you're having a prosecutor's office looking at a case and saying, all right, man, like this is not the strongest case in the world. So here you didn't have that. You had them dig in, and then you had them do the things that they did procedurally in terms of kind of like starting from the beginning by sealing the probable cause affidavit. It was very disturbing to me, just because you don't see that. You have like it immediately as a defense attorney, you're wondering why they did that. Like what, and then when it came out, I was looking at them, oh, okay, well, what on here required them or made them feel that it was necessary to seal this? And certainly nothing reached the level that you need to reach in terms of reasoning for a judge to agree to do it. Like that didn't exist with that particular document. So like right from the beginning, something seemed off about it, and I'm like, oh, like that. And that was really kind of what set me off and kind of set the tone for me that something was strange about this case in terms of the procedural the process and the posture that was being taken by the prosecution and the defense. And I don't know. It's just been a mess. And, I mean, now it's going to be put in the laps of the appellate court to try to start figuring it out. I had Kara on, she doesn't have, she said at the appellate level, she's not as secure about them coming back with a remand. She tends to think it'll probably be at the Indiana Supreme Court level where that may happen. But the one good bit of news is that, the process works pretty quickly in Indiana in comparison, So it's one of those things where you have to kind of like just hope against hope that, you get some judges that are willing to look at all the issues at bay. And, I mean, you're pouring through stuff now, even still, like people don't understand that you're still working. And, try to explain the process of like when you're handed a bunch of discovery during the trial phase, right? So you're and that the defense is pushing the envelope in terms of having a speedy trial demand out there, which really shortens the length of time that you have to do what you need to do. But, kind of explain the investigative process in terms of like when you're digging through things and you see a tip and you're like, oh my God, like that now gives me 6 people that I, number one, first have to find, and that I now have to go try and interview. Just kind of like talk people through the process of what working with this discovery was like?
Well, the discovery was so massive that I'm a pattern person. So for me, when I was looking at how am I going to attack 15,000 plus tips, and let me give me an idea. It took 4 straight months of approximately 40 to 50 hours per week, every week, just to get through the tips, just to get through the tip file. If that gives you an idea of how many tips we're looking at. So we would have notebooks or files, accordion files, and okay, this one seems to have merit. Well, because in a case like this, you'll get every woman calling in her ex-husband. You'll get every ex-husband calling in his ex-wife. You'll get every woman mad at her brother. Like, we had those types of tips. People, an ex-boyfriend, this is my chance to name him as a serial killer. I dated a guy last year and he's a real psychopath. So, when you've done this long enough, you have the ability to kind of weed through what are the standalone tips that might seem petty or retaliatory, and you prioritize those tips because every tip has to be looked at. We don't have the luxury of not, we're not going to go look at that one just because we think a woman's mad at her ex. No, it's about prioritizing those leads and then seeing what's been done on their end too. And what I noticed coming out of the gate was that several names started to appear in the tips over and over and over and over and over. And then as the length of time progressed, more information was being called in on those specific subjects with additional details. And now I'm going, okay, there's some meat to this. There's some real meat to this. And by the way, we ran Rick's name through the tip line and through the tip file. It never existed. It wasn't there. I mean, I just thought I'd mention in 15,800 and some odd tips, Richard Allen's name never appeared. Thought that might be important since he's serving 130 years now for that crime.
It's interesting.
He was his sole tip, and for some reason it never got put in the file. Anyway, so we start to see the emergence of these tips on these same players. And then you start to see what I called sub tips, people that were calling in saying, I know that this person called you, but this other person is still out there. They're still bragging. Did you see their social media for the last 2 months? Why isn't this person being investigated? And it became a process of desperation for some of the tipsters, like I've never seen before, where people are calling the tip line and sending emails 5-6 times a day going, please, please, please look at these people. Why isn't this being done? And then there's nothing there. There's no follow-up, or they've determined that the lead didn't have merit or value. And we're going, what? How the hell do you have the right to do this? And so we ended up with this file. I had a file, Chris had a file, I'm sure Matt had a file, Brian had a file, all of us had our files. And we would then compare notes. We would get on the phone, we would start talking. A lot of our time was spent comparing what we learned in one section of the tip file to what another investigator uncovered in their section of the tip file. And then you go, well, these people's names appeared 15 times in these tips. Well, hold on a second, because there's a reference to this over here in this file. And then we start kind of comparing even more notes and really started whittling down who we thought could have committed this crime, or who we believe may have committed this crime. And to then be accused of fabricating the Franks memo, when the entire theory of this crime came from the FBI. A task force that was created specifically to attack these voluminous tips. So then this 27-page memo comes out, and the defense team, finds that in discovery. We get that. And that 27-page memo suddenly becomes a 136-page Frank's motion. So much time and effort and energy and labor and work was put into that Frank's motion. The amount of investigation that went behind that. And I cannot tell you how many times we all kind of looked at each other. And I remember, one day when Andy kind of looked at me and he's like, it's bad enough that we sound crazy. Let's just try to get through this trial without getting all of us killed. Come on. We got a lot of people dropping over this case. We have a lot of people associated with the defense charged in this case with unrelated crimes. We have good cops, good investigators whose lives have been smeared over this case. Why? Because we agreed with the FBI. Damn it. How dare we? How dare we agree with the Federal Bureau of Investigation? They kicked him out.
They did.
If they could have kicked us out, oh wait, they tried. And they failed. They failed because we took this task on knowing we might not see a penny of this pay. Because, hey, let's just fiscally strangle the defense on a personal level on top of screwing them professionally. Let's make sure they can't pay their bills, too. And then go out and attack them for that. So they can all kiss it, as far as I'm concerned. We agreed with the work done by the FBI task force. It was good work, Bob. It was really thorough work. And then the timing of that, timing of Greg Ferenczi being killed, and how quickly the FBI was dropped after his murder. I mean, I'm sorry if we are not saying this. Why are we not saying that the man who wrote the Odin memo was murdered 5 days after he wrote the Odin memo by an Odinist prison guard? Why is everybody afraid to say that?
Well, you're not.
Yeah, well, that's why they're coming after me with everything they have, Bob. Kathy and I spent a day with Kathy earlier this week, and when we went to leave, our hugs, I hug Kathy probably 10 times every time I see her. Hugged her and I said, I love you. And she said, I love you too. And she's just like, I don't know if I'm going to see you again. Every time we see each other, it's like, is this the last time? Is this the day I'm going to get a bullet in my head because I know the truth about Rick Allen? Well, shit. Bring it on. Bring it on. If this is the hill upon which I have to die, bring it on, man. You don't frame an innocent man for murder and not expect his defense team to fight to the death for his life. It killed me to watch that today, Bob. Killed me. He was walking out of the courtroom and they were dragging him, and I just looked at him and he looked at me and I said, we love you. Hang in there. We're not done. You and I have had this talk. I did not have the greatest respect for criminal defense attorneys before this case because I thought as a victim's advocate fighting on behalf of missing and murdered children that I just had all the answers, and that criminal defense attorneys were nothing but just pariahs who were trying to get bad men off. That is not how it always works. And I have the utmost respect for what you and Allie and Andy and Brad and all of you, Jen, all of you do. Talk about a learning lesson.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough gig. It's a tough gig being a defense attorney. There's no question about it. But
yeah,
I mean,
I've been waiting 2 years to say that stuff. So
I'm glad that I'm glad that you're able to. I know it. I mean, I obviously know it. You know, your passion, you're a heart on your sleeve type of person, which I love and respect. You know, I'm the same way, you know, I am very much the same way. And I think it's important for people to start to hear, you know, and obviously, like, you're kind of in this period of time now where you're still limited in terms of, you know, what you're going to be able to talk about, because obviously there's a bigger goal here. You know, but I think that it's important for people to know that the people behind the scenes, which is very much you, and many others that are still in it for this fight, you know, and it's you know, and it's tough because of the resistance that we get and you get, you know, especially it's like I'm always just kind of arguing for the general proposition that all defendants in this country, no matter how horrible the crime that they're accused of committing is, that due process under the law and a fair trial are mandatory, because we have to vet the evidence, we have to go through the process, and then because you want to feel secure in convictions, you want to feel that they got the right person. And that starts with the families of the victims. They deserve that. The victims themselves deserve that. And you know, when you make that argument, when you know, like, I've taken a lot of shit for the last 2 years, and I frankly don't care. Like, I've never like it matters not to me, because everybody has an agenda and I have an agenda as well. But my agenda is very, very broad. My agenda is to educate people on our rights in this country as citizens. My agenda is to educate people on what defense attorneys really do, what we really do in this system. And it's not trying to get scumbag criminals off when they have the evidence and somebody has committed a horrific act. 99% of the time, if not higher, they go down because they have the evidence and they're typically convicted. The job for a defense attorney in a case like that, if our client is requiring us to go to trial, because that's our client's choice, is to make sure that they get a fair trial, make sure that the cops did their job correctly and by the law, make sure the prosecutors are doing the same thing, that they're trying it correctly. And that's it. And then if my client is convicted, I can go home, I can lay down in bed, and I can sleep like a baby, because I know I've done my job. I don't ever feel in a case where they had powerful evidence against my client, I don't ever feel you know, like, upset or depressed ever. Like, if my client clearly was the perpetrator, and I went in and did my job to the best of my ability, and my client understood his rights, I got him a fair trial, you know, everything was on the up and up, that's what my job was, you know. And I know that thing's going to be able to withstand an appeal, because the prosecutors did their job properly, the cops did their job properly. It's a system of checks and balances that has to exist, otherwise we're living in total anarchy. You know, or a fascist country where the government just prosecutes people and no one has to go through a trial, and people are just thrown in prisons without, you know, the benefit of a trial. And, like, no one wants to live in that world. Believe me, if we did it for a week, if we did a big social experiment and said, hey, you know what, let's just put a halt on the Constitution and all of the laws that it provides us as citizens. Well, we're gonna go straight purge for a week in every sense of the word, and it's gonna be a free for all. And I'll come back to you guys, and I'll see if you like living in that country, and I can guarantee you the answer is going to be unequivocally no. You know, but for me in this case, and I I'm not privy to the discovery. I mean, I just haven't seen it other than it was presented at trial. and it's not like I couldn't have asked Brad or Andy, hey man, shoot me an NDA, and I'll work on it in terms of just trying to brainstorm with y'all. It's like I probably could have done that, but I had a different message I was trying to get out, and it was I couldn't have done that and continued to try to shed light on this case in the way that I was doing it by being involved on that side of it. You know what I mean? And it's like I'm still sitting here not being privy to everything that and I'm dying to know what it is. I'm dying to know. It's like, obviously you and I have had many conversations, and in terms of some of the tips, but that when you're talking about that many tips and the number of rabbit holes that you've had to dive into, and then try to pull yourself out of that rabbit hole, man, it's, I can't even imagine having gone through it. And it's like, from your perspective, where you've been in terms of, working with the team and kind of seeing it from the inside looking out, it's like you have a very different perspective than any other person that wasn't involved with litigating that case. You have a much more personal stake in it. I mean, obviously is I developed a relationship with Kathy, that changed my view of everything, because I then became very protective of Kathy, because I've always known as a defense attorney that whether the defendant who is got family is innocent or guilty, it matters not. That the family of that person are victims in a much different way than the victims of the crimes and the families that they left behind. But they're victims because their entire lives are shattered in a way that most of us will never understand. Like, everything that was normal for you is gone. Everything that you've built for 35 years is gone. All of it. And, for people to be ignorant to that hurts me deeply, and it more emboldens me to protect those people. And Kathy is very much one of those people to me. I happen to adore her. I happen to adore Jan and Ken, all of them. Like, every one of the Allens I've gotten to know are salt of the earth, and they're going through it, and it's like you've got this thing where you're trying to keep Kathy positive, which is goddamn near impossible. It's like she's just watched the system devour her husband whole. You know what I'm saying? And spit him out to the tune of 130 years. And now you have to ask Kathy to have faith that the system's going to work for Rick and her down the road. And that's a hard ask when you've just gone through what you've gone through, and I don't know. It's tough. It's tough.
It's a very hard ask. And then to compound that grief and that trauma with the guilt that Kathy feels for insisting that Rick pick up the phone that night and call the police to volunteer himself, having been on that bridge that day. That's what a lot of people are probably just about ready to find out. Kathy Allen came home from work. Rick was asleep on the couch, and the television was blaring. It was on. The TV was on. He'd fallen asleep with the TV on. And she walked in to the 5:30 news, I think it was. And it was featuring a story about the girls being missing. And she kind of, shook Rick to wake him up. Hey, did you say you were going out for a walk, today on the trails? Yeah, why? Did you happen to see these two girls? They're missing. What? What are you talking about? Rick, They want anybody who was there to call the police. They're hoping maybe you saw something. That guilt will never subside. Ever. She feels like she accidentally and inadvertently threw her husband to the wolves to be framed because that's precisely what occurred. We'll have the conversations later, Bob, about why a DNR officer was assisting in this investigation. We will have the conversations as to how untrained people were touching these witness statements and these evidence, some pieces of evidence. We'll talk about all that because, as you know, this story is going to take years to unravel from now moving forward.
Yeah.
But is going through to have the hate, the false and despicable allegation, Kathy having known what her husband.
You're breaking up a little bit.
Things.
I thought you
Sorry.
say it again.
I had to go just this week. Sorry.
You're,
Sorry, the weather up here is a little choppy, as you know.
Yeah, I know it. Well, I adore you. I think you're amazing. And you have you always have a platform to come in and talk to me on here. So, and as we progress through this thing, I'm sure we'll be having a lot of really, really interesting conversations because, there's just a lot about this case that people aren't privy to, and it's all going to start coming out, which I think if you go back and watch, like people didn't want to watch that presser. It was mandatory to watch that press conference. That was, in terms of where we're at right now in this process, that was mandatory viewing because if you rewatch it, there's a lot of telling moments in that because believe me, they know what's yet to come. They know that this isn't over. This is going to be a case where the appellate process is going to be followed very, very closely by a lot of different people. And there's going to be a lot of really talented, brilliant people working on the side of the defense that are going to make sure that this thing is looked at properly and that the arguments are crafted in a way that is going to make it difficult for the appellate court to say, yeah, I think we got to do this thing again. So, but I adore you, E. Be safe out there. Try to get some sleep. Take care of your people. And
we'll be talking.
You know it. All right, Erica. Erica Morris, thank you for joining us. We appreciate you.
Love you guys. Hide a fun size for me.
She heard you. All right. Bye.
Bye, Bob.
All right, y'all. So yeah.
He's just an old man and out.
Yeah. All right, y'all. I'll obviously have more guests on. I hit Andy up. They're not ready to start speaking publicly yet, like at least to the extent where I'm going to want to be talking to them. So we'll be having a lot of guests on now that the sentencing is happened, but we have to keep in mind that we are still very much in the litigation phase of this case. So I just want to thank everybody real quickly. Lisa, I do not believe that the jurors were under the gag order. I think that they may have felt like they were, but it was never addressed in court. Gull never told them, at least in the courtroom, that they were not allowed to speak. I think that they were all aware at some point that there was a gag. I mean, maybe we'll start hearing from them. I'd love to have any of the jurors come on because I want to know. I want to know what their decision hung on. To me, when I'm looking at it based on the questions that they asked and based on what we now know that they reviewed while they were deliberating, which was sounded like audio. It sounded like they wanted to hear Rick's voice. I'm not going to be surprised to find out that they feel or that they felt that was Rick Allen's voice on the video, which is a terrifying prospect to me. That would be one of the primary reasons they convicted him. But I mean, like I'm dying to know. I'm dying to know. But I don't think they were under the gag, and if they were, they're not now. But I don't think that they were. And thank you for your support, Lisa. I appreciate it. Sean, thank you for being in here, brother. Everybody who doesn't follow Sean, he's got an amazing channel over at Potentially Criminal. He's a great guy. We've been dying to do something together. I think I've been on his show one time, but I want to get him over here. Super bright lawyer, really funny guy too. On top of it, so he's a good man, and I'm sure that we'll be doing stuff here in the very near future. But thank you. Melody, persecuting innocent man is not justice. Agreed. And thank you for your generosity. Charlotte, giving a lot of reasons to look at Kathy. And just so you guys know, she's talking about Kathy Shank, the woman who somehow discovered that tip that had been buried for 5 years, not Kathy Allen. So I saw some confusion about that. As far as the transcripts being released, they're going to have to be put together first, which is part of the appellate process. As you can imagine, that'll be very costly. It's going to be, and whether or not they're going to be released publicly in the near future is unknown. But I'm certainly going to be trying to get my hands on it, if for nothing else, to compare how accurate my notes were, because I think they were pretty accurate. People are like, oh, it's got a defense slant. I'm like, it was not a defense slant. It was me trying to write down every word as if I was a court reporter. So my opinions are my opinions. When I'm trying to read what was said in court, there was no opinions injected. So we'll have to keep an eye on the transcripts. I'm sure I will. I promise you, I will be keeping a close eye on those transcripts. Yeah, who's right? She's talking about, with the press conference. Thank you for your generosity. We had to watch it. It was mandatory. We had to watch it. I suggest everybody go back and watch it again, where you can maybe hear the sound a little better and listen to the things that people are saying, and see if that jives with you as being like your typical kind of post-conviction, post-sentence press conference, or if it seemed a little different. I mean, I realize I am a defense attorney, so I look at everything through a defense attorney's lens, and I own that. Like, I'm not going to pretend that I'm not what I am. So, I always look at things with a little, skeptical eye, so, but I'm aware of that. I'm asking you all to go and check it out yourselves. Maybe watch it again. Tell me if you think it's a little weird. Charlotte Cross, thank you for your generosity. And it's your fault. This was a in time real. She's not saying it was my fault. She was saying that she was talking to this was during the presser. So thank you, Charlotte. Meg, well, that law enforcement award ceremony was just weird. Agreed. And P.S. it's not over. Thank you, Meg P, for everything you do and your generosity. Yeah, Charlotte, they were talking about Kathy Shanks. So I think we clarified that. Dr. Vonda, I will definitely get that to Scout. Thank you so much for your generosity. I appreciate you, and Scout will appreciate that too. And then, so Lisa, I think this was the last of your questions that I didn't get to. Would the Court of Appeals be able to hear the audio that Judge Gull did not allow? Did not allow in various videos, or the time lapse of Richard Allen. If it was entered into evidence, they'll hear it. Now, if you're talking about from the camcorder that we found out did actually have sound, and then Gull stopped Rosie from playing. I think that's what you're talking about, where Gull was telling Rosie, you're not allowed to play the transport videos where they were moving Rick from place to place, which had sound. She said you can't play the sound. I don't think so. But that issue can be brought up in appeal that the sound should have been heard. So, but in terms of whatever's in the record, I think that they'll be limited to what was admissible. Lowlight, thank you for that. And hopefully we kind of answered the question. Free Radical, is there any legal precedent for appeals to throw out, say, 60 plus confessions and deem them all unusable? What's the legal precedent? Probably not. That number of confessions. Now, I imagine Free Radical, you and I could have a very spirited debate on what you consider to be a confession. Now, if you consider somebody just saying I did it to be a full confession, you and I have a different impression of what a confession is, but I'm here for it. I truly am. I certainly don't shy away from the debate. Mandy, what's up?
I need you.
Okay, well, I'm rapping. Okay, I wanted to believe it was RA, but after this trial sham, I know these guys are torturers and should be ashamed. The real killers are out there. They might be.
He's wrapping up. Wrap it up.
Hold on. Oh, come on, man. It's like that was Allison's fault. I'm going through the thing. That was totally Allison's fault. I had to mute it. I'm trying to go through. Yeah. So I was saying I'd like to have this particular statement flying behind a plane on a banner. If especially innocent people should never talk to the police without a lawyer present with them. Don't let the cops fool you into thinking that because you were asking for a lawyer that you're somehow proving to them that you're guilty. That is a sham. All right, Lisa, I think we handled that. Thank you for the support. Jay Rabbit, we handled that. Thank you for the support. Kale, for Erica, thank you. I adore you. I'm sure she saw and appreciated that. Jennifer, Erica, thank you. Erica, know we support you. Thank you for your generosity. Una, speechless. I'm waiting to see the evidence. Precocent, member for 9 months. Wait for it. The feds are coming. We'll see. Okay. Baker's wait. No, I'm supposed to be doing that at 2 with him, not noon. But I'll check with Broken Baker. I thought I emailed him 2 o'clock. We have a very different time schedule. So, all right, you guys are amazing. I love you all.
Thank you, everyone. Have a Merry Christmas.
Well, I'm sure you'll see me before Christmas, but thank you guys. Because without you, make sure on the way out you like, share, subscribe, all the YouTube things, and just remember, without y'all, I'm just an old man talking about a lot of cases. Ciao.
Heart